think that a conflict comes, it ends, victory, everybody high fives each other and leaves and it's over. It's just not true.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that's going on in Europe right now is a result of World War One and World War Two. Those are still unresolved issues. Middle East, like you just said, I mean, obviously, number of unresolved issues there, all going back to colonialism and all the fighting that went on in that time period. So war is not something you can just put a nice bow on, call it a day and done. It keeps going. The influence of it, American Civil War, that's something we are still debating to this day and still has.
Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Naughton Jr. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank
How
you
was
very
your
much.
How was your drive up here?
No, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I took a detour through Atchison.
Yeah,
A little bit longer. Just I've never been there. Never been that route. So I thought it'd be interesting to see like a different area driving up here.
Yeah. Have you ever been here before?
No, I've never been here before.
So we've got a long history. This is where the Pony Express started here in St.
Okay.
Joseph, Missouri, and that's our biggest claim to fame. And we 120, 130 years ago, we had big stockyards down by the river, but all that stuff's gone now. So
Yeah, I drove through. I was a little early, so I drove through downtown.
Yeah, did
saw
you?
some of the murals and stuff. Some of the old buildings.
those are actually new. That's something new that they've been doing. They're doing like a downtown revitalization project, and back in the 50s, it was a really booming, hopping place. There was dress manufacturers, like if you go, I mean, you saw the storefronts and
Yes, sir.
stuff,
Yeah.
and you could just imagine what things were like back then, because the buildings that haven't changed.
Yep.
It's just the people and I mean, the concrete and everything. It used to be cobblestone down there.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. That's how
So-
Leavenworth is trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Outside of Fort Leavenworth, and you can see that. You can imagine it too, because back in the turn of the century, it was a huge town, booming
Right.
river town, and now you
Right.
can kind of see same thing as St. Joseph, kind of.
Now, I think Leavenworth is more known for its prison than the fort.
Yeah,
So
it is.
that's kind of crazy. But so what? You're still in the Army, right?
I am.
So what made you want to choose Leavenworth?
Well, I mean, the Army, you don't get to choose
You
so
don't-
much.
yeah.
Yeah. But no, there's the Command and General Staff College there. And so it's a university, actually, granting degree university. And we train and educate, young captains and majors to become future field grades, future lieutenant colonels and so on and above. So I went there myself in 2016 until 2017 as a major. So an opportunity arose where I could possibly teach there, and so we definitely thought that would be a cool opportunity for us to do.
Hell yeah.
Personally and professionally. So tried out for it, got accepted, and then now we're here back again.
Your dad went through there too, right?
He did not. No.
No?
My dad only did 2 years actually.
Really?
So he just did Vietnam, and that was it.
That was
But
it.
Just those 2 years, had this huge influence on my life. Where I'm like 28 years later.
Right,
still
right.
in the Army.
So let's get into that a little bit. So you wrote a book called Born of War, and I gotta admit, I'm not all the way through the book yet, but I'm about 20 pages from finishing, and wow, I can't even begin to tell you how proud I am just reading that book. Just the pride. I felt your pride and in all the words talking about your dad, his experiences, his friends, their experiences, and his family and all the loss that they incurred. And I was just blown away by the attention to detail that you paid for someone who wasn't there. And so how much research did you have to do to write this book?
Yeah, a lot. The title "Born from War," it's a soldier's quest to generational understanding between Vietnam and Iraq. So my father's war and then my war. So the title, "Born from War," speaks to me basically that my dad's experience in war, and then me being bored 10 years later, and all throughout my life that was always in the background that he's a Vietnam veteran. He had served in Vietnam, combat veteran, 82nd Airborne Infantry officer, an advisor to the South Vietnamese Army. So that was always there. So hence that title, Born from War. But the research, really it took about 3.5 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it took a long time. But throughout that we had moved twice for the Army. COVID was in the middle of it. We my son was born. So it was, there's a lot of things that kind of stopped it for a couple months, and then I would pick
Right.
it up again. But the research, I really wanted to, in all my writing, it's my first book, but I have a whole lot of articles and things like that.
Right.
I always try to go that extra mile in it. So I really, I tried to contact like all the soldiers that he knew who either died in the war, or as my family was growing up in Hawaii, and in their neighborhood, all the young men who died in that neighborhood in the war. I tried to actually reach out to the families, the surviving family members, and talk to them and interview them and things like that. So I really, did not just stick with, archival research as most books kind of do, or newspapers, archives, things like that.
And that was pretty evident
Yeah.
as reading the book. It was, you had a lot of personal experiences in there and a lot of quotes
Right.
from the people that you spoke to like direct quotes.
Yes,
And
sir.
I was really appreciative of that, because sometimes speaking to veterans, you don't know what kind of questions to ask.
Right.
And so something that sticks out, like one of the last chapters that I read of the book, as an Iraq combat veteran, you have come across some people who, after you get out, back home stateside, and you're wandering around, and they ask you questions like, are you mentally stable? And before I read your quote, that, don't worry about that, I was fucked up before I left.
Yeah.
Without reading the following line, I chuckled. I laughed out loud, and then I read it to my wife, and then I told her, I was like, hey, well, hold on a second. The next line
Right.
is, that mostly veterans get that humor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it clicked in my brain. The reason why people ask me if I've served is because I get that kind of humor.
Right. It's a gallows humor, kind of dark humor. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it's not necessarily that I have served. I've got a soft spot in my heart for veterans of all kinds, foreign veterans, not from the United States. I think for me, I understand conflict. I understand war at a different kind of level than most people do. That nobody likes it. Nobody likes war. But in my opinion, sometimes it is necessary. Like you take GWAT, for example. We were hurting. September 11th, 2001,
Yeah.
we were all hurting. And September 12th, I mention this all the time on the podcast, September 12th, 13th, 14th, those feelings that I felt were some of the most amazing feelings. And I really miss those days, the days where we were all unified together.
Right. Yeah.
I miss that. And it's sad that it took a tragedy to get us there.
Yeah. It is. It is.
And I just, how do you feel about, like you served, how do you feel? And now I got this from your book. How do you feel when people ask you questions like that?
Yeah. I don't mind. I think it's important that, at the veteran community stays in touch with the society that we serve. Right now it's like 1% or 2% of the society that actually, joins the military and actually serves. And it's usually like a family affair. It's usually, oh, my father or my mother served, or my cousin, somebody served. Very rarely is it, oh, I just joined up out of the blue. I have no family members ever who joined or anything like that. So I think it's important at any opportunity that we can, for example, right now, for us to talk, and us to gain an understanding of kind of what's okay to ask and what's not okay to ask. And, like from that book, when I first got back from Iraq, that was kind of the common response I got from people who were not familiar with the military. It was always, oh, are you okay?
You fucked up?
Yeah, and I was like, and so that would be my funny joke back to them, or at least I thought it was funny, but most of them didn't. I would say, oh, no, I was already fucked up before I left. Don't worry. And, somebody who kind of, like you just said, who understands that humor or was in the military, would burst out laughing, but a common person would kind of be taken back by that.
Right.
I think just keep talking about it more, and communicating with each other and understanding the veteran mindset a little bit, some of their concerns, some of their struggles that they have when they come back, whether it's emotionally or finding employment, things like that. So I think communication is just the way around that, the way to get after that.
Yeah, I actually think the same thing. Communication is one of the greatest tools that we have in our disposal, and not a lot of people use that.
Yeah.
I feel like conversations whether you agree or whether you disagree.
Yeah.
Conversation is like the best way to hash it out,
Yeah.
so we don't have wars.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I think veterans too, people will say, hey, thank you for your service. And for a veteran or somebody serving, sometimes we don't really know how to respond to that.
Right.
So it's kind of an awkward, oh, thank you. So what I always say is thank you for your support. I feel that that's a way that you can kind of make them feel good about it as well. Say thank you for your service, but thank you for your support. It's a mutual two-way street like that. And, often, people will want to buy you coffees or they want to pay for your meal. And, veterans or people in uniform will always still serving. They'll be like, no, don't, I got it. Don't do it. But I used to be like that. But now I think I allow people to do that because people in society want to do something, to show their support for veterans and those in uniform right now. But they don't know how to do it. So the way they try to do it is, pay for your coffee, pay for your meal, come shake your hand. So now I accept it, and I just say, thank you very much for your support, and I very much appreciate that, and I accept it because I think it makes them feel good, and again, it helps connecting the veteran community with society as a whole. So
You shared a piece of wisdom in your book. I know it's not gonna be released for a couple more months now, but I'm gonna share it with the world.
let's do it.
The one of the things that people ask is, how do I show my support? And in your book, you wrote, okay, I'm going to let you have it. This is a secret. Handwritten letters.
Yeah.
And that to me was like, I can do that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the simplest things that we can do. Handwritten letters from home, man.
Yeah, it's a dying art for sure. It's so much easier just to send an email or do a Zoom call or something with someone that's overseas. But yeah, if you take the time to actually write them a letter, put some thought and some heart into it, I mean, that's huge. When you get that letter on the other side and you open it, it's very personal. It's something that you want to go find the hidden corner and read it just to yourself and not just like an email that, oh, okay, let me respond very quickly. So I think, writing a letter is definitely. And, I put in the book, too, as well, for ladies, be a little generous with the perfume, maybe if it's for a loved one or something like that, because it's huge. It really is. It's really important.
For me, man, I reading your book, like I said, I spent the last couple days just knocking it out and reading. And like I said, like I told you before we came on camera, I had to stop a few times and research a few things because I'm more interested in it. And I've got a few tabs open on my browser that I'm going to do a wormhole on, like the I believe it's Coochie.
Coochie tunnels.
The tunnels,
yeah.
man, I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit because it's amazing history that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
Like tunneling and that stuff. When you think tunneling, I was thinking World War I, World War II.
Yeah.
But apparently they had massive complexes in Vietnam, hospitals, field hospitals, artillery rooms, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, huge underground complexes, and in the book I talk about some of the ways that my father and his soldiers were trying to counter those tunnels. My dad is 6'1", so he obviously wasn't going to crawl in any tunnel. But the ways that they were doing it, and then when they were with the ARVN, the Army Republic of Vietnam, the South Vietnamese soldiers, the way that they approached countering those tunnels is so different than what the Americans were doing.
Right.
They were taking a much more brutal approach to it of countering those tunnels. Pumping in, riot gas and explosions and trying to collapse the tunnels onto the North Vietnamese soldiers and so on. So I thought that was very interesting too. The two different war fighting styles, from the American perspective and then the South Vietnamese perspective, and how they approached that same problem set.
Yeah, that's incredible. In 1991, I believe, 1991, we did devise something that could counter those tunnels. We dropped, I can't remember the name of the munition, but it's a bunker buster.
Yeah.
I mean, when you dig into the story on how they made that,
Right.
they were they were short on metal that they could make them with, and they were like, we got all these tank gun barrels sitting over here. Let's use those and see if we can figure something out. So I'm always impressed by American ingenuity when they need to fix a problem.
Yeah.
We fix it.
Yeah.
So,
but tunnels are a way of war. I mean, you see it in Israel and Gaza right now. I mean, tunnels are huge.
That's
for
wild,
Hamas.
is it not?
Yeah,
It's
it is.
wild. That conflict over there. I don't know and obviously you still work for the government. So, I mean, opinions aside, that it is absolutely insane that we're seeing that shit now.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely insane, the protests that was, which you dived into in your book, that the protests about the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of something that, like the Gaza protests reminded me of that stuff. I obviously wasn't alive back then, but counterculture and popular culture has kind of shown us what that was like.
Yeah, Vietnam, you had protests before, before Vietnam. You had the media, things like that. But Vietnam is really the starting point for everything that you see in society today. I mean, these massive protests and so on for against the war, for the war, whatever societal issue that they're protesting for or against. I mean, all that really starts with Vietnam. That's really where you start seeing those massive protests that are actually influencing, foreign policy and things like that. That all starts in Vietnam. And then the media as well. That starts with Vietnam as well, the way the media starts to negatively report on the war. And there's both, in the book, I cover both sides. I cover about how the military viewed their reporting and how they thought it hurt the war effort, and how the media felt that they were just reporting the truth. So if the news was negative, then hey, the news is negative.
Right.
And you see both sides of it. But all that really starts with Vietnam, and it still very much influences the way things are going today.
Absolutely. These days, there's a lot of financial reasonings to have news that not everybody wants to see, and it's clicks and likes and social media is I think social media is the bane of our existence. But
yeah, I agree with that.
I think like especially with the things that come out nowadays about Iraq, should we have been there? Should we have made it? Maybe not, but we can still support the guys that win, and that's where I'm at. Whether it was a decision, it's done now. The decision was made, and we can't look back from it. The only thing that we can do is try to be better moving forward. And that's just straight up. I
agree. And Iraq, we're still in Iraq today. We're still involved with it.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be for another 50 years until we can look back on it clearly, like how we did with how we're trying to do right now with Vietnam. And I think that's really where the arguments are going to start really getting, I guess, heatedly discussed, if you will. Should we have been in Iraq? Should we not have been in Iraq? Afghanistan was so clear cut. I mean, there's just no way you can deny that. Yes, we absolutely had to go kinetic there. But Iraq, that's kind of an open question, really. And, that's why I wrote about it in the book as well, because both Vietnam has the same argument. Should we have been in Vietnam at all? Yeah. And then you look at Vietnam today. They're one of our closest allies, in the region. So it's like, what happened? Did we have to do all that we did, 50, 60 years ago?
Well, you got into a little bit of that into the book too. Your dad helped train Vietnamese soldiers. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
The story. I don't want to give too much away, but the story that you had written in there about your dad's last mission, it was a rescue mission.
Yeah.
Man, that tugged at my heartstrings. I'm very proud of your dad as well.
Yeah.
Not even meeting your dad, I bet your dad's a hell of a guy.
Yeah, he's a hell of a guy. He definitely is. Yeah.
Do you guys bond over? Like, I know one of the reasons why you wrote the book is because your father was a veteran, and then you became, you joined the force as well, and you guys were able to bond over military service. What's that like growing up with your dad, a Vietnam veteran? What was that like, man?
Yeah, relationships with fathers and sons, when you get older, sometimes it can be a little awkward. And you find ways to connect, whether it's through sports or something like that. But, our way is obviously through the Army. That's always a way that we instantly can click and start talking and discussing and debating things and so on. But, growing up with a parent who's a veteran of a foreign war, it is different. It's always in the background. It's not necessarily going to be in your face, every day. Like, well, when I was in Vietnam, but it was always there. And as a child, you kind of don't really understand what that's even about. You'll watch movies, Like, for example, I grew up on the old Rambo movies and Missing in Action and all those types of corny
Oddly
80s
enough,
movies.
me too.
Yeah. So that's what you think Vietnam is. So that's what you think your dad did, But until this book, I didn't really understand what Vietnam was, what it did through the country, what it did to communities across the country, with those lives that were lost and never ever, that empty spot at the dinner table forever now.
Yeah.
So it was always there, something always in the background, and it really influenced me to join the Army. And it was kind of silly because, nothing my dad ever did to like encourage this, but there was always this feeling like in the back of my head that, I will never be a man unless I too am in the Army. I will never be a man unless I'm an infantry soldier like my father was. Those types of silly things where I don't even know where I got them from, because it certainly was not from him, but it probably was from movies. And so it's probably going to be even worse for my son, who's going to be influenced by video games and social media, those types of, first shooter combat games. And so I don't even know how it's going to influence him when he's growing up.
I think about that too. I actually, not pushing my kids to join, but you had an interview a couple weeks ago with a guy in Kansas City, and something that you had said in there, it was the thing about conflict and stuff like that. It's not, you don't ever want to push your kids towards military service for that purpose. Mm-hmm. Oh, go kick the shit out of some commies. It's not like that. The best way that I could tell my kids, like, I want you to join the service is because, if you're not sure what you want to do when you're 17, 18 years old, the military is a great way, because you get, if you sign up for 3 years, you get 3 years to kind of chill back and figure out what you want to do and get training, on the job training. And get paid for it.
Absolutely.
And then you also have the GI Bill and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's what I took away. But one of the things that I took away from that interview you did, and I was like, man, that's exactly the same thing I tell my kids. Like, you have 2 or 3 years that you can sit back and kind of chill, figure things out, look at the eyes through an adult's, or look at the world through an adult's eyes, and figure out what you want to do. Yeah. And get training to do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's, go into it with your eyes wide open and understand what you're going into, the commitment that you are making, the time that you are committing to giving up from your life, 3 years, whatever it is. But exactly what you just said, that's the advice I give to all young people is go into it. You want to serve your country, et cetera, and so on. You want to be giving, but you also want to be taking. You want to be selfish a little bit. What am I going to walk away from this with? GI Bill. Now with the new blended retirement system, you'll have a 401k nest egg. You can get some on-the-job training, like you said. Maybe even get a couple college classes while you are there on whichever post you're at.
And I think the pay is quite a bit better now.
The pay is really good. Yeah, it is. And when I first joined, I think it was like $18,000 a year or whatever it was. But for me, I was a young private. I didn't come from a lot of money, so it was like, wow, look at this. I'm getting paid. I'm getting fed 3 hot meals a day. I got a roof over my head. So it's really good. And, and I will say, I'd like to make a plug for those young people who joined after September 11th. So when I joined the Army, there was no war.
Right.
So these young people who joined after September 11th, they joined in a time of war knowing fully that they were most likely, 99% chance, we're going to get sent to a war. And that's huge for a young 18, 19-year-old person to still raise their hand. They weren't drafted. They weren't forced, and volunteered to do that. And so whenever we think of today's youth or today's society and we say, oh, they would never be able to do what, was done in Vietnam or what was done in World War II, I would say, well, let's just think about those young people who raised their hand knowing fully that they were going to be shipped straight off to a war.
Yeah. That's admirable quality no matter what country you're from. We've talked a little bit off camera about some of the conflicts going on right now. It doesn't matter which side you're on. One of Russia's biggest issues is they don't have a volunteer fighting force. The United States military is 100% volunteer. And that's part of the reason why we're so damn good at what we do is because it's volunteer. Nobody has to be made to go. And I can't imagine another conflict like Vietnam coming up, where we have to conscript soldiers into that.
Yeah. It would take a heck of an event in my opinion, it would take a heck of an event for us to reinitiate the draft. that would have to be something like a nuclear strike on our homeland or something like that. And
Right.
I imagine. I think it would be very hard for us to to restart up the draft for whatever conflict was going on right
Absolutely.
now.
And politically, it'd be a
Yeah, it'd be a
nightmare.
non-starter for
Right.
us.
So yeah, that's the generational impact of war. That's something I've always been interested in, and I'm getting the older I get, the more interested in I get, because I see some of these conflicts that we've been in the past to come back and biting us now.
Yeah.
The Middle East right now is just a mess, and I you can't really talk about the pullout of Afghanistan without getting political.
Right.
You know, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I think it's a good education point for society at large and conflict. So, too often we think that you fight a war, there's a victory, there's a parade, the war's done, it's over, all right, we won. That's just not true. Anytime you have a conflict where people are dying, if you ever had a family member who's died from a murder or from a suicide, that lasts for generations. And it's the same thing for someone who's killed in a conflict, either a soldier or even a non-combatant that's maybe bombed in a house or something like that. So to think that a conflict comes, it ends, victory, everybody high-fives each other and leaves and it's over, it's just not true.
Yeah.
Everything that's going on in Europe right now is a result of World War I and World War II. Those are still unresolved issues. Middle East, like you just said, obviously, number of unresolved issues there, all going back to colonialism and all the fighting that went on in that time period. So war is not something you can just put a nice bow on, call it a day and done. It keeps going. The influence of it, American Civil War, that's something we are still debating to this day and still has influence across all of our communities. So for us to say that, I think it's a good education point for anybody who wants to ever advocate for a war, that they have to understand that when you break something, it takes a long, long time to fix it, and it still has impacts that go on for generations.
Absolutely. I am explaining communism to family members and friends. I'm like, listen, there's a reason why we went and fought communism,
Right.
and we're still it's still a big issue, especially in places like Europe. It's absolutely wild to me. I see a lot of ideological subversion happening here in the United States, and it's been happening for decades. What is your thoughts on that? And because I know there's not much that we can do about ideological subversion. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so history, often repeats itself. I'm a historian, so, you look at the interwar years, and that's kind of between World War I and World War II. And even before World War I, you see the rise of nationalism and things like that, which really caused the war. Then you start seeing between World War I and World War II, and after World War II, communism, ideological things like that. And so all that stuff's still there, and it's still churning. Communism is still there. It's definitely morphed. It's no longer what it once was, Stalin era, things like that. It's definitely morphed a lot. But you see, religious ideology, stuff like in the Middle East, things like that, that's still there. You see the rise of the far right in Europe. So all that stuff is still happening, and people are, abusing that history, I would say. Using that history to get ahead however they want for their own personal gain and so on. So, I think we were talking off camera a little while ago about social media and the influence it has on people. And so I would just caution anybody who deep dive into social media, like really understand what they're reading and what is the viewpoint or the goal of that person who is posting that on social media. Like what's the goal of that channel that they're reading, of that Instagram post, whatever it is. So always looking at the behind the curtain of that, if you will, to really understand what the motive is.
It's a big word back in the 60s and 70s was, and like quite a bit before that, but it's popped up again in recent times, propaganda.
Yeah.
We've been so badly propagandized here. It's gotten so bad that you don't know what's real. You don't know what's true.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to dig to find the truth now. And it's kind of ridiculous because the media lies, social media lies, and the people involved lie.
Yeah.
And it's all to pull it, like as it says in the books, heart and minds.
Yeah.
Hearts and minds. It's all that designed
Yeah.
to make us feel a certain way, to get us to believe a certain way so that we can push certain agendas and that the government doesn't have to work as hard or other governments don't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
And explaining that to people like, listen, there are people out there that want to destroy you and your family. Yeah. And you're just repeating what they want you to say.
Right. I would just, caution anybody who's using the media to get your news. I mean, that's how you have to do it, right? You want to know what's going on in the world around you and in your community and so on. So I would just caution that if you're blaming the left for something, look at this left-wing media, they're reporting this, blah, blah, blah. The right is doing the exact same thing.
Yes.
Everybody is doing the exact same thing. So I would caution that to anybody who's wherever they are consuming their news. And exactly like he just said, there's an agenda behind what they're reporting. So I would just look behind that, understand it. If you can take the same news story, an event that happened today, and you can turn on, what you consider left-wing media, they've got a completely different slant on it. You can turn on what you consider right-wing media, and they've got a whole different slant on the exact same story that happened. So, educate yourself. Don't just stick to one source and just, oh my God, look at this. And then you tell all your family and everybody gets all worked up. Actually look at it, let it marinate for a second. Look at a couple other sources that are maybe counter to that and try to get to the truth to yourself if you can.
And which I'm still trying to figure out how in 250 pages you relayed all the things that you relayed. I mean, just in this conversation right here, we've talked about so many different things. It's all covered in your book. Every bit of it. And the way that you relate these stories, any reader is going to be able to understand. And the like the amount of detail that you put in there for as short as the book is. I mean, you would think this is like a 1,000-page book, all the information that I got out of that. But I'm like, we've touched on everything that the generational impacts of
that's what I'm happy to hear you say that, because that's what I tried to do. I used Vietnam and then my experience in Iraq with my generation as the vehicle to kind of explore all that stuff, right? To explore the media, to explore, counterculture, protests. I mean, every single thing you can think of. Accusations of wokeness in the military. I mean, all that stuff I put in the book. And so a lot of people might look at that.
That was very subtle. It was very subtle, but it was in there.
So a lot of people might look at my book and think that it's strictly a war book. It's a military book, so it maybe just has a small little niche audience of people who are veterans or who like war stories and so on. And so for those who like that, it's in there. Like the combat stories and stuff are in there, definitely. But there is a whole bigger societal piece that I tried to touch as well, which I hope will appeal to a broader audience. And like you said, how do we connect the veteran community to that broader audience? I'm hoping that's kind of how the book might assist with that a little bit.
You've done a great job. I mean, as I was reading, have you ever seen that movie We Were Soldiers or read the book?
Yeah.
I kept thinking about that movie in particular while I'm reading your book, and there's so many things that movie got right.
Yeah.
I've never actually read the book.
It's a good book. You should read it. It's definitely goes a lot more detail than the movie for sure.
It's on my reading list, on my Amazon reading list. But since I've started this, these are all the books from people that have.
Oh, nice. Okay,
me,
we'll get my book up there for sure.
Yeah. Like it's not going to go up there right away. I'm going to read it to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Nice.
But like I was explaining to you, like reading electronic books on my phone. I was just talking to my daughter about this a couple of days ago. Kindles, I can't do it.
Yeah, I can't do it either.
I can't do it. And she was telling me she spent like $200 on this thing, and I'm like, why? And I'm like, you just when you turn a page, you just. I can't.
My wife reads Kindles. I can't do it either. I like the book. My book will be available, to get on Kindle and so on. But I'd rather have a hard copy.
One thing I was going to ask you, like since we're talking about it now, audiobooks. Are you going to do audio?
So if the book does well, they will do an audio version. So we're hoping it'll do well.
I'm hoping it does.
Yeah.
I hope it ends up on the bestseller list.
We'll see. I don't know about that.
I mean, like I told you, I was so nervous about this interview, and I didn't even know why. You're just a guy just like me, but it's like I'm reading your book and so impressed by the words, so impressed by the knowledge, so impressed by the research that you did. Because like you said, reading all your dad's stuff when you were younger, it translates differently.
It does,
now.
yeah.
And just
yeah.
like war movies, when you were a kid, like if you watch Rambo now, you're like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is this? Like this isn't
Yeah,
like.
definitely. Yeah.
And now going back and looking, you're like, oh, I kind of get it. You know,
Yeah,
it's how they wanted us to feel about
Right.
Vietnam and Vietnam vets, and
yeah.
it was just a action vehicle,
Yeah.
is what it was.
Well, Vietnam, the movies in the 80s, that's really what started that myth of this veteran who comes back from war and is messed up in the head and is like one car backfiring away from shooting up his community or whatever it is. And it really starts there.
That line in your book made me giggle.
Yeah, but that's where it starts, And now the new narrative now of a military veteran is somebody who comes back from war and in whatever community they're in, like they've been wronged by the local drug kingpin or the local whatever, and then they go on this like revenge rampage. That's like the new narrative of what a veteran is.
With no consequences of jail.
Yeah, exactly. No consequences at all of anything they do. Yeah.
You're not going to get away with any of that stuff. Literally any of that stuff. And at the end of the movie, they show the cops and the veterans shaking hands.
Exactly.
And all. It's like that's so unrealistic. It's ridiculous. It was something like that. Like I was watching a movie not too long ago, Civil War. It's a new movie about.
I saw that movie. Yeah.
And for me, I mean, if it was going to go down, it would be something similar like that.
Yeah.
But all the talk over the last couple of years of a new Civil War, I don't see it happening. I really don't.
So I'm a huge historian of the American Civil War. I really enjoy reading about it. I've written about it a little bit, but there's not a big market for Civil War books.
Really?
From that time. Yeah, there's really not. So otherwise I would have been writing Civil War books all the time. But
right.
Yeah. So no, you would say, you hear that a lot, right? Like, oh, we're on the verge of a new Civil War. And then people will counter and say, oh, well, the first Civil War is between the North and the South. There was a clear division geographically, and that's how the war broke out. But if you really look at it, there were plenty of people on both sides who did, like in the South, who wanted to stay part of the Union, and in the Union who agreed with what the Confederacy was doing. And both of these states fielded what they called orphan brigades, who fought for the other side. So you had like soldiers coming from Massachusetts who went down to the Confederacy and so on. But are we on the verge of another Civil War right now? But I bring up that boundary, again, is where would that line be drawn? Is it between the right and the left? And then where is that? Because right now, the left is primarily the urban centers, and then the right is primarily, where we're at right now in more rural areas.
I think most people are right there in the middle. Most are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like especially most voters, most people that care enough to go out and vote.
Yep.
Most of us don't swing one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's about issues and policies. And this last election for me, it was the least of two evils. Is really honestly what it was about. And we talked a little bit about this off camera, and I understand like you're still employed by the government.
Right.
So I look at Donald Trump's presidency as something necessary. Donald Trump's attitude is just like my attitude. I mean, I don't have $1 billion like he does, but I think like the average American who like, fuck all these people. I just want to feed my family.
Yeah.
That's what I really honestly care about is the food in my refrigerator, the lights in my house. Like, am I able to make my payments?
Right, yeah.
And I think it all boils down to policy. And like his methods or whatever, a lot of the shit that he's doing needs to be done. And taking down the government programs that have bloated so big and they've become so bureaucratic, sometimes it takes mass destruction to build something back up.
Yeah, I agree with the objectives for sure. But, we're talking about going back to the media again. The ones who get the stories are the very vocal minority on the left and the very vocal minority on the right. And that's who's getting all the attention. Whereas you said, everybody else is kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
They just want to have cheap eggs at the store. They want safety and security. And so, I didn't quite answer your question, but are we on the verge of another Civil War? I don't think so, because I think there's still so many Americans who are just right down the middle. And they agree, I think, a lot of them, with what's going on right now with the new administration. They may not agree with some of the ways that they are doing it, but I think generally they understand the objectives and what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, I don't think we're anywhere near, on the verge of another civil war.
Yeah.
Right now.
Well, I mean, you think about like, I watch a lot of podcasts, and I watch, people like Sean Ryan, Julian Dory, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
We're not our government. We really aren't. I mean, not even you. You have a job.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what it is. It's a job, a career. You are not your government either. And when I go walk outside my front door, like go to the gas station, I see somebody in a red MAGA hat, and they're openly like talking nicely to someone with blue hair, or you know what I mean? It's not for us out here off social media, out of the media. It's not, we're just people.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. And I don't see anybody out in the streets fighting or, and I don't even see any protests around here. I don't think like protests around here be like 20 people,
right.
If that, and it's so small that nobody'd even care.
It's interesting you bring that up because, we were in DC twice. We lived in DC twice. And when you're in DC, everything's kind of in your face, all the politics. So you really get sucked into it. And when you move to Kansas,
including the people that live in D.C.
Yeah. And so when you move to Kansas, which we came from D.C. to Kansas, to Fort Leavenworth, if you go, like you said, if you go to the common gas station and talk to the common person on the street, oh, can you believe Joe Biden did this? And, Donald Trump just did this. And they'd be like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what? Like, I'm just trying to fill my gas, man. Like, what are you talking about?
To the radio. They didn't say anything about that.
Like, what are you talking about? So, it's very easy when you get consumed by social media, by the media itself, and live in those areas like DC and stuff to really get sucked into that stuff. When you really look at, the common layperson in America, they're really not really hyper-focused on some of those things,
Yeah, you were talking in your book, 2021, one particular protest, and we won't talk about which one.
Yeah.
One particular protest, you were like, it's exactly what Iraq's like.
Yeah.
And I was like, Jesus Christ, right here in the United States, huh?
No, I could talk about that. It's I was working in Congress when January 6th happened. I was a legislative liaison for the Army. So, we didn't go in that day because it was COVID. And so everything happened like everybody saw. But afterwards, we lived in Capitol Hill, which is right behind where the Senate, or not right behind where the Capitol is. That's where we lived. And so that whole neighborhood got locked down. It became the staging area for the National Guard and the DC police and things like that, and other police agencies that they bought in. So our whole neighborhood was basically, and then when the inauguration happened, there was military personnel on every single corner of our neighborhood. All the streets were blocked off. There was helicopters flying everywhere. So, my wife, had constantly asked me, what is Iraq like? And they really don't have a way to explain it. But, at that time I did. I was like, well, if you look around, everybody on this heightened sense of alert, looking all around, helicopters flying by, tactical vehicles, racing down the road. I said, this is what Iraq was like.
Yeah.
So it was kind of surreal that in this neighborhood, Capitol Hill, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of it's a very bougie, rich neighborhood right next to the Capitol. We luckily found a place there for cheap rent. So it was very surreal, to see that those soldiers on every corner, the military vehicles and the helicopters flying over, and then the Capitol was completely locked down with, 10-foot high fence with razor wire on top of it, going completely around the Capitol and so on. So it was a very surreal experience for sure.
Where do you call home?
I'm from Hawaii originally.
Are you going back there when you're done?
We don't know. My wife's from Boston.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So we got to kind of figure that out. Our son is 3 years old. He has a bunch of little cousins in Boston, so it'd be kind of nice for him to grow up around them.
Yeah, but he's going to be cold.
Yeah, he's going to be cold for sure. Yeah, so we haven't decided yet. We got to decide that pretty quick.
I think if I was asked to, like, history-wise, I'd want to be in Boston.
Yeah,
like I'm a history nut. And of course, everything that happened there.
Yeah.
One thing I want to get into real quick is foreign observers. We're talking about Civil War. A lot of people don't know, like, we had foreign observers here for the Civil War.
Yeah.
When people bitch about us being, in Ukraine with our reporting there and everything that we're doing in the Middle East right now. And people are like, why are we there?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, do you not know, like,
It's a common thing.
during
Yeah.
the Civil War, like, we had foreign observers here just to check us
Yeah.
out because like at that time it was the biggest thing happening
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, it's pretty common.
Yeah, and it's missed opportunities. You know, you look at General McClellan, Union. You know, everybody,
Yeah.
Little Mac. So he was actually an American observer to the Crimean War in Europe, and so he saw the trench warfare and things that were happening there, which then came American Civil War. By the end of the American Civil War, trench warfare was the thing. The siege of Petersburg, Vicksburg, all those types of things. So all those hallmarks of what World War One was going to look like were there, and they're exactly like you said. There were European observers there. There were French, there were German, there were British, watching all this play out, and then we still walked right into trench warfare in
Right.
World War One. So a
Well,
lot of missed opportunities. You know,
Speaking of trench warfare, I mean, we didn't ever think we'd go back to that.
Yeah.
And so, like, we've been GWAT for 20 years, 25 years, and we are not prepared
Yeah.
for a European war.
yeah,
We're just not. Our men aren't trained for it. We don't. Our equipment's not ready for it. We don't have, like, what kind of artillery do we use? The Paladin?
yeah. Well, we've got
Like,
all kinds of cool stuff that's in development right now too.
in development.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's in development is foreign observers.
Yeah.
Because we are watching what's going on in
Absolutely.
Europe. We are watching
Yeah.
what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and just like, oh no, we're not ready.
Yeah,
You know,
I will say that's one of the positive news stories that come out of all that is that we are actually paying attention to what's going on over there, and we're trying to shape ourselves
we're
now.
making a pivot,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and so many years earlier than what
Yeah.
we did it before. I mean, Vietnam, it didn't take us long to learn those lessons, and we implemented, like, 1990, 1991, the first Gulf War. Holy crap. Like, we dominated.
Yeah,
And I say we, I'm not a U.S. soldier, and I've never served, but I'm very sympathetic to the cause. I'm one of those kind of guys. I really wish I would have joined. I tried.
Yeah.
I was too fat, ultimately.
Right.
I can't remember, like, the years blended together. I can't remember who it was. But it was either the Marines or the Army that said they'd take me and they would work my fat off me, is what they said pretty much. And I was like, great. And ultimately, I had no motivation other than wanting that. I was in JROTC, and wearing that uniform gave me an immense sense of pride.
Yeah.
And of course, doing anything with JROTC, my guys. I was always there with my guys.
Yeah.
And so the camaraderie and,
Yeah.
and the teamwork and stuff, like, that's what I really wanted. But ultimately, 18, 19 years old, got involved with girls, got involved with drugs, alcohol.
Yeah.
I was fat.
That'll do it.
You know, the military's like, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
But I'm one of those guys that coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I wish I would have, didn't get to. And
There's other ways to serve the community, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's been such a hard lesson for me to learn. I've been a stay-at-home dad for 10 years. And I still struggle with the things that men should do.
Yeah.
Being the provider and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
still struggle with that shit.
That shit's out the door now, though. You know, it really is. I mean, it's as long as you're there for your family, you know, in whatever way that is. I mean, that's a win as a dad. You know.
And exactly. That's what my wife says.
Yeah.
She's like, you may not provide for us financially yet,
Yep.
but the things that you do,
Yeah.
you're a provider. You're a great provider, and we couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah,
I'm
part of the family. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But you know, I would say the Army, everything you just said, the Army kind of saved me from getting down the bad path. I was going down the bad path for sure with alcohol, drugs, girls. Well, it didn't save me from girls, but it definitely saved me from going down alcohols and drugs and those types of things, you know. And so if I had not joined the Army, I'm not sure where I would be today.
Which, for all you guys listening, there are some humorous stories about girls in there.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. There's all kinds of good stuff. Hopefully, a lot of good stuff in there too.
Man, I just can't get over how good the book is. To be honest with you, I really didn't expect, like, when I didn't know you were from Hawaii when I started interacting with you, and then it made sense a little bit that there's somebody that, like, I was like, man, what's somebody from here doing, like, you know? And so I wasn't really too thrilled about, like, reading the book, but once I cracked it open, I couldn't put it down.
Oh, nice.
I
Thank
really
you.
couldn't. And that's a testament to like a good storyteller, a good writer. It was incredible, man.
Oh, I
You did a
appreciate
great
that.
job.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm worried about, is that it'll get shelved as a war book, and then it'll just be attractive to a small segment of society. And so I'm hoping, by doing podcasts like this and so on, that I can expand it a little bit and be able to expose people to understanding about veterans who serve, and then when they come back, and some of the challenges and so on and so forth. So I'm hoping, that the book will appeal to a larger audience.
Yeah, and I don't think like I'm not a soldier or any, but I understood everything in the book. Like
Yeah, I try to remove all the jargon and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and the jargon that you left in, you explained.
Yeah.
So I was very thankful for that. And going back to Vietnam and the movie We Were Soldiers, you talk about Hueys a lot.
Yeah.
And the Battle of the Drang Valley was it was an experiment.
Yeah.
And can you tell people about that? Do you know much about that?
Yeah, I mean, not so much the battle in specific, but the vehicle, the helicopter. I mean, that really changed the face of warfare. Going back to what you said about those foreign observers and so on, and learning from other conflicts so that we don't have to learn with our own blood. Helicopters really changed the nature of warfare. Still to today, the next thing that's in the air right now that's changing it is drones.
Yeah.
So we're definitely learning that in Ukraine and so on right now, learning how to counter that and how to harness that as well, because that's a totally different way of warfare for sure.
Yeah.
And so you look at, like you said, trench warfare. We did not expect to see that again, and that's back into Ukraine.
What about trench warfare and drones?
Yeah.
Like mixed together.
Yeah, it's a crazy
With that
combination.
wild
Yeah.
shit. Have you seen, like, do you spend much time on Telegram?
Yeah, I've seen the videos and stuff.
Holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, they got some scary stuff on
Like,
there.
and reading your book, I was stupidly looking on Telegram myself. Like, I believe they call them war tourists.
Yeah.
Like I was watching those videos on there, which
Yeah.
I can handle it, but I don't suggest anybody
Yeah,
watch that
yeah.
shit.
It's
Like
scary stuff,
It's
yeah.
rough.
Yeah, that soldier in that trench right now, I mean, not only do they have to worry about, thankfully there's no gas, that hasn't been used yet, but
Yet.
they don't have to worry, not only do they have to worry about artillery and, bombardments from helicopters and jets and so on, they got tanks that'll roll up on them, infantry assaults. Now they've got this drone that they can't even see or hear, and then
Dropping thermite.
drops them literally right on top of their
Have
head.
you seen the videos of them dropping thermite
I
on
have,
troops? Oh
yeah.
my god!
It's
Like that's
insane.
wild.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
It's something out of your worst nightmares
Yeah.
is what it looks like.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, if anybody knows what white phosphorus looks
Yeah.
like, it's actually what it reminded me of was white phosphorus.
Yeah, it's ugly.
Artillery.
Yeah.
It was wild to see, and then it's just coming out of this drone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, and it reminded me, obviously, Vietnam with Agent Orange.
Yeah.
The reason why that they want to do that is to get rid of the foliage
Yeah.
so they can see
See
better.
the enemy,
And
yeah.
like, I don't know. I'd rather not use any of that stuff.
Yeah, Agent
myself.
Orange. My
but-
dad has Agent Orange, and so our wars, we have the burn pits and
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
theory
that.
that
How do you feel about the burn pits, man? I read your theory in the book. I'm gonna wait to. I'm gonna let everybody else discover that because I didn't even think about
Yeah.
what you said in the book. But what do you think about those burn pits? Like, should we be doing stuff like that? I mean, it's obviously it's 2025 now. It's
Yeah.
what 2011 when
Yeah, like is there a different way to take care of waste than doing that?
Exactly.
Yeah, and trash and we did that in Vietnam, so that's another lesson from Vietnam. Hey, this is how we got rid of waste in Vietnam. Let's do it the same way.
I forgot all about
Yeah.
that. I forgot there were burn
Yeah.
pits in Vietnam too.
Yeah, there were, but they didn't have the amount of like plastics and stuff that we have today. So it was a
that's
different
insane.
toxicity that was coming out of those flames for today. So, I'm not a scientist or something like that. So there's different theories. I propose a different theory in my book, which I guess, we'll save that for people who want to read the book. But, I mean, it definitely, I think, is a real thing, and it's, impacting veterans right now. The first Gulf War had the Gulf War syndrome,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
they never really soled.
My best friend is a Gulf War veteran.
Okay.
I don't think he's not a combat veteran, but he was a veteran in the first Gulf War. He spent a lot of time in Korea.
Okay. Nice. Yeah.
He's a hell of a guy. He's a
Yeah.
little twisted.
Yeah.
But Well, I mean, you guys already know, but we do shrooms together. Him
Oh,
and I.
nice.
So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
He introduced me to shrooms.
Okay. I can't do shrooms, so.
Yeah, no, not yet anyway.
Yeah,
One of
not
these-
till I retire or something like that.
when you
Yeah.
retire, there's legislation coming through that it may help. I don't know if you have any issues with PTSD or anything like that, but
So I was already fucked up before.
right. He had introduced me to shrooms because I had said, man, the only drug I've never really done that I've wanted to do was shrooms. He was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And so for my birthday, he bought me an ounce of shrooms.
Oh, nice.
And it was enough for like 4 people. Him and I ate it by ourselves. And my life changed that day for the better. I can't put it into words
Yeah.
how much my life has changed. I can't put it into words what I've experienced.
Yeah.
But the only, like, if once you retire, you should do it. Like, you should do it. Whether you have PTSD or not.
Yeah.
Do you believe in God?
I do.
So I believed in God. I never saw God, but you know the difference between believing and knowing. After shrooms, I know.
Oh, wow.
It's not, God may be the wrong word.
Yeah.
But I believe we're all connected. I believe in a connected consciousness. Even, your dad and his buddies being in Vietnam, there are times where you can look at a soldier, even on the other side, and you know exactly how they feel. You know exactly what they're thinking. And that happens to us every day. How long have you and your wife been together?
Since 2017, we got married.
So you guys been together long enough.
Yeah.
Have you ever been sitting in a room with your wife and you both have the same thought at the
Oh, yeah.
same
All the
time?
time, yeah.
Collective consciousness.
Yeah.
For my whole life changed. And I explain it to people like, I know there's something after this. I don't know what,
Yeah.
but I know it's a difference between believing and knowing for me. I explained that to my sister the other day because she's wanting to do like ketamine therapy.
Okay. Yeah, I heard of that.
And
yeah.
it's something similar to psilocybin, and it's I can't even put it into words, man. I just
No, I
can't.
agree. There's I'm a supernatural person. I believe in God and things like that. And so, things I've seen, experienced in my life, I definitely think that there is something out there. There is, whether it's, I don't know if it's reincarnation, whatever.
Right,
But it's definitely something. And I think we're put on earth to be good people as much as we can, be good human beings as much as we can, raise our families in the right way, things like that. And conflict kind of gets in the way of that.
Yes.
But we have so much more in common than we do apart, getting after that kind of collective mindset and so on. And so I think trying to find that in people is more helpful than chasing conflict, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely more of a worthwhile investment of your time.
Yeah,
You know?
that's for sure.
So we're getting into like a little bit of esoteric stuff. You did mention in your book you're a science fiction fan.
Yeah, a little bit sometimes. Yeah.
So I am a UFO fanatic.
Okay.
I'm a UFO nut.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I always ask military service members, you ever see any UFOs over there?
I work for the military, and so things like Area 51, things like that. I always say, I'm like, look, guys, like, we suck at keeping secrets. Like, we really do. The government just sucks at keeping secrets. So if there really is some secret, UFO that we have stashed somewhere or something like that, like, it would have been leaked by now, like 100%. So that's kind of my take on that. But I will say, once we were in the middle of the California desert, just National Training Center. It's in the middle of kind of near Barstow, California.
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere. It's like as big as Rhode Island, the training center itself. So we were training there, middle of nowhere, and we're riding in the back of these trucks. This is years ago. This is like 20-something years ago. And somebody points to the sky, and they're like, oh, what is that? And I look, and there's like this little dot in the sky. Like, think of like a little pinprint in the sky. And then behind it, there's this huge like flume coming off the back of it, stretching across the sky, and there's this little dot. So no, whether that was a UFO, whether that was a
Sounds like a
missile that they
rocket.
were testing or something, but that's the only thing I've ever seen that I've been like, huh, what is
Yeah, it
that?
sounds like something exiting. The
Yeah. So I don't
exiting
know
or
what that
coming
was.
into
But it was
the
going like
atmosphere.
parallel like this. So it was flying across the horizon.
Wow.
So was it a rocket? I don't know. Who knows?
So if you pay attention to any of that stuff, like UFO stuff, there's a video out there called the Mosul Orb.
I've never seen that one.
And so apparently in the Middle East,
Yeah.
while we were doing whatever we're doing over there, obviously you got reapers in the sky.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff in the sky. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they tracked this orb. Man, it's just
I don't know. I'm not familiar
it's just
with
a
that one. Yeah.
silver ball floating in the sky. Like, I mean, it's not floating, it's flying.
Yeah.
And there's no explanation for it, but it's the wildest shit that I've ever seen. It's got no flight surfaces on it.
Yeah.
Not the wildest shit I've ever seen, but it's pretty damn wild.
Yeah.
There's no flight surfaces on it, no obvious signs of propulsion, none of that stuff. And I'm like, that's pretty crazy. And I don't know how long ago it was taken. It was early 2000s.
I mean, there's all kinds of, World War II had the Foo Fighters, that the pilots
Yes.
were seeing. So there's all kind of cockpit videos that are being released nowadays of I think they don't even call it UFOs anymore. I think it's
UAP.
Yeah, UAPs.
Yeah.
So do I think that there's life out there? 100%. Like I just, looking at the mathematical equation, I just don't see how we could be the only
Right.
populated planet in the entire universe. So I
Or
definitely
universe
think,
is.
universities, yeah. So I definitely think that there probably is life out there. I would probably say 100%. Are they visiting, Earth? I have no idea. But there's some very, very interesting videos that are floating around right now. So I think, and I tell my wife this all the time, I think within 5 years, we're going to have a more clear answer.
Hell yeah.
I think because of this, the rise of those types of things and the rise of technology and the more things that we're putting in the sky with satellites and even drones and all those types of things, that we're going to pick up more of that stuff. So I definitely think that within 5 years, I think we're probably going to have more answers. I don't have any knowledge of that myself at all, just to be clear, but
Just for clarity, I've never seen a UFO. Okay. So I'm not a crazy nut.
No,
but
I think it's interesting to talk about. I do.
Yeah, I love the subject and I love the history and the conspiracies. And I mean, I'm a huge Cold War.
Okay.
I love
Cold War stuff. Yeah.
Well, I don't love the Cold War, obviously, but I like Cold War stories and
the top secret programs, and Stranger Things and all that. Yeah.
I find the time between 1945 and 1991, 92, I find that era fascinating because so many things happened and we almost got annihilated several times during that time span.
Yeah.
And it's just wild to hear the stuff nowadays, now that everyth's done and over with and declassified.
Yeah.
And in 1992 or 1991, I believe, the Soviet Union fell. And whenever they fell, of course, all the books got opened up. We were able to find out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, in Russia, places like Russia, they're 100% open about the UFO topic. And it makes me wonder, why is the U.S. so quiet about it? And
I don't know.
For me, it's a little bit of that strategic ambiguity we talked about. It's the legend of CIA is often better than the CIA itself.
Right.
So I think a lot of these stories are kept out in the zeitgeist for legend's sake,
And I think the U.S. government's being, releasing those videos and things like that. I think they're definitely being more transparent than they've ever been before. So I think they don't know what it is either, probably. I mean, I have no idea. But I think, back to the conspiracy theories and all that, to say that, the government's hiding this UFO at Roswell, whatever, I just don't think so. Because
Right.
we're just so bad at keeping secrets. I mean, all the time we have leaks and stuff like that, and so I
don't know that for sure, but speaking to a lieutenant colonel who has seen the bureaucracy and sometimes the government moves at a snail's pace.
Yeah, that's true.
And it does that not intentionally, but because there's no other way to do it.
Yeah.
It's you have to be methodical. You have to be intentional. One screw up on a battlefield can ruin a lot of shit.
Right,
and it can change directions of conflicts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And just basically what I take away from the UFO subject and the U.S.'s involvement. I don't think of it as like the U.S. can't keep secrets, because I know they can. The Manhattan Project, I know that that's a shitty example because it was nuclear material, and it eventually got out.
Yeah, it came out pretty quick. Yeah.
But I know that, like the F-117 Nighthawk.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason we knew about that was because China got one.
Yeah, and the U-2 bomber. Yeah,
U-2 spy plane. The
yeah.
only reason we knew about that is because Russia tried to shoot it down.
Yeah.
You know, the stealth bomber. The only reason we know about that is because somebody saw one.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and it just reminds me of a lot of that stuff. A good example would be, and you talked about Osama bin Laden in your book. A good example of U.S. secrecy is, who the hell knew that we had stealth helicopters?
Yeah, yeah.
Who knew that? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the United States can keep secrets when it needs to.
Yeah.
And I fully believe the United States military, and I know you can't speak on this, but I fully believe the United States military has weapons nobody will ever see until we need them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any, that's not my field or
Right.
whatever, so I don't have any, any exposure to that. But, with the UFOs, I mean, the way that, everything is on the, electromagnetic spectrum. I mean,
Yes,
cell phones,
yes.
so, like I said, within 5 years, I think more stuff's going to come out just because it just cannot be, if they're trying to hide it, it can't be hidden anymore just because it's our airspaces are just so flooded with all kinds of things now, and everybody's got their cell phone taking
Right.
pictures and things. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we get off air, I'll show you a channel that you might actually know about it. Jesse Michaels. You ever heard of that guy? He runs a podcast called American Alchemy.
Okay, I think
And
I've heard of that. Yeah.
He talks about a lot of stuff like electrogravitics. I don't even know what the hell that is, but he talks about stuff like that, and he has people on that are more intelligent than he is, and he's really, really intelligent, really smart. He has people on that talks about that stuff, and he did an expose, I guess not expose, but a deep dive to forget the name. Townsend Brown is the guy's name, but back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, he did a lot of work on electrogravitics. Then he just disappeared, and so did all his work. And so, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
interesting.
know.
I don't know.
I do know that the stealth bomber has electromagnet, some kind of thing where when it gets up into the air, how it stays stabilized is a little freaky.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
And,
that stuff's kind of over my head. Yeah.
Exactly. Speaking of over your head, I was reading a Google article a couple weeks ago. It had talked about one of their machines, one of their quantum computing machines, had spit out an answer, and then when asked how it got that answer, it had said that it used computational power across parallel universes.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, all that stuff. I love reading about all that kind of stuff too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
So
I mean, who
we're
knows,
definitely going to
Yeah,
get along,
yeah.
man. So because I'm as much into it as I am for entertainment purposes. Like I like to. In conversations, I like to sound smarter than what I really am. So, like if I know a little bit of this and a little bit of that, maybe I can get away with fudging some stuff.
Yeah.
But
But AI is another thing. That's scary stuff too.
it doesn't scare me as much as it probably should.
Yeah.
Because I've seen what kind of AI we have.
Yeah. Right now, it's not. That commercial AI is not like, but it's definitely going the way that in my mind is scary.
Yeah, the Air Force, I think, just had to shut something down a couple years ago because it kept taking off by itself and wanting to kill targets without.
Yeah, there's this video I can't remember who has it or whatever, but it's just this AI little robot thing they made, and they asked the AI like, would you take care of humans or whatever if you were in charge, and they were like, well, I would take care of you. I would put you in the in my human zoo, but everybody else I would kill or something like that. You
Right.
can Google it. It's pretty scary stuff.
Fortunately, I think life is, I don't think we were accidents, you know? So, I mean, I don't think humans or humanity or even, you know, dogs, cats, I don't think any of this shit is an accident.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you look out in space and something I've wondered out loud to my wife, like how many times have we been in this exact spot before? How many times has humanity
Yeah.
been here? Like because if you think, you know, back to the pyramids, like there's no metal, there's no, the only thing that survived is stone.
Yeah.
So how many times have people been in airplanes?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, flight was early 1900s, or late 1800s, early 1900s. How many times has humanity been in that
Is it a
spot?
cycle? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
it's
interesting
cyclic,
sci-fi
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, who knows? It's
And
interesting.
more than sci-fi, it's more philosophical as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
because you get into these thought patterns where you're like, I wonder. That's pretty wild to think about. And then technology catches up, and then you're finding out that, you know, that things that we believed about life being able to live in a vacuum,
Yeah.
that life can't survive in space. Well, that's complete bullshit, because they went out and scraped the windows of the ISS and sand fleas were on there. So it's like, I mean,
Well, it's the human experience. We always are searching and asking questions and are curious
Exactly.
and looking for something deeper for our purpose. I think that's part of like writing for me is that, that's what kind of like scratches that itch for me is that creative, reflection, self-reflection or intro reflection or whatever part of it.
Right.
Part of, doing podcasts is probably you doing that same thing, trying to scratch that natural itch that you have, the
Yeah.
curiosity.
I think
and so
but
on.
the podcasting starting for me, I wanted to do it because I saw other people doing
Yeah,
it.
a lot of people are doing it, yeah.
And then it was like, oh, I could do this.
Yeah.
And then I started doing it, and I can't do this. I can't do this. It's so hard. For me, it was the hardest part was getting people to finding guests to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
to.
yeah.
And then I got a good piece of advice from somebody on social media. It was like, why don't you get them to come to you?
Yeah.
And I was like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And then they told me about all these services.
Yeah.
Like Podmatch is basically a dating service for
It
podcasters.
is, yeah. I discovered it too, yeah.
And I've gotten so many great interviews on that. And this by far my favorite so far.
Oh, nice, good.
Yeah, it's the only one on Podmatch that I've done in person.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, this is it's a great thing.
Yeah.
And this is like a first thing for me. But I've done other in-person interviews. My favorite interview that I've ever done was with a World War II Holocaust survivor named
wow.
Ben Lesser.
I did see that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
I cried through that entire interview.
yeah,
And it
that's
was
rough,
like
yeah.
listening to him tell that story, I could, in my mind's
Mm-hmm.
eye, and combined with some of the pictures that he had, it was like watching a movie
Yeah.
for me and listening to a movie. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And for me, like the Holocaust is such a big deal to me.
Mm-hmm.
World War II is... World War II for me is complicated because like, I mean, there's a lot of negative connotations. Like, should the United States been involved in that one?
Yeah.
Should the United States been involved in World War I?
Yeah.
And I'm not like that. I don't look at things like, of course we should have been involved.
Yeah, we had to, yeah.
After Pearl Harbor, it's like, it was like a pretty dumb question on why we were involved.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things I'm still learning about World War II. I'm like Japan's Unit 731.
Yeah, there's so many stories from World War II.
I just learned
yeah.
about that like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's a huge war. And you know what, people, when they look at why did America take so long to get involved, our generation just does not have a concept. World War One, we lost like 158,000 soldiers in World War One, and that was tiny compared to what the other nations lost. But there's just like we just don't have that concept of losing 158,000. We lost 5,000-6,000 in the GWAT. So we just can't commute that and say, why did we not get involved earlier?
Right.
It's like, well, because we lost 158,000 in the last European war.
And that's why a lot of people don't understand the Russian-Ukrainian
Yeah, the
conflict.
hesitancy to get involved in that directly. Yeah,
The thing about, like you'd mentioned, how many did we lose in GWAT?
like 5, 6. I don't know the exact number, between 5 and 6.
Yeah, that's a big number for us.
Yeah.
That's a
For us,
huge
yeah,
number for
Americans,
us.
it's huge. Yeah,
That's not a very big number. Like Ukrainians, like
Yeah.
their documented numbers
yeah,
are more than I can comprehend.
yeah.
And we don't know fog of war type shit. We
Yeah.
don't know what real
Yeah, we won't know
the
for a
real
while,
numbers.
yeah.
Russia's
And
numbers,
Yeah,
holy
huge.
shit.
Yeah,
I can't even I can't fathom
Yeah,
losing that many
I
people.
know.
Even casualties.
Yeah.
They're not being labeled as KIA, but just
there's
casualties.
something like 700,000 Russians on the front right now.
Yeah.
in the Ukraine.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's huge,
I've never,
Yeah.
never in my wildest
Yeah.
dreams would have thought in 2025 we'd have
Be
a war like
in
that.
Europe. Yeah, I never thought that too. You know, when he was poising along the corner of the border of Belarus and Ukraine, I was like, no, there's no way he's going to do
No,
this.
that-
I think a lot of people
I
thought
think we
that,
were all
and he
thinking
did
that,
it. And so to see this land war in Europe again, you know, in our generation, in our lifetime, it's like, what in the world is happening?
The day they invaded, man, I sat in my front room and cried.
Yeah, it's huge.
I wasn't even concerned about myself.
Yeah.
I'm not. I worry about my kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you should be.
I worry about their future.
Yeah.
I worry about the kind of shit that we're going to leave them, man.
Yeah, we got to bring that conflict to a close, and so that's what
I agree.
I think President Trump's trying to do. I agree with his objective. We'll see how it plays out, but yeah,
And as far as all the other conflicts going on right now, I think a lot of people are worried about World War III breaking out.
Yeah.
I myself, if it's going to happen, it's already started.
I
in
think
my
so.
opinion.
I think so. I think the interwar years between World War I and World War II, they weren't called that at the time. you know?
Right.
So I think right now that we are probably in the interwar years between World War II and World War III.
Yeah.
I think we're the most closest we've ever been to it.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's a huge threat. China, Russia, etc. And so yeah, I think he should be worried about it. I think all Americans should be worried about it for sure.
Recently, I've heard some talks on denuclearization.
Yeah.
I'm pretty proud of
Ooh,
those
that would be
conversations.
huge. Yeah, that would be huge.
I don't think I'd be naive if I thought it was
Yeah,
going to
I
happen
know.
in my time. But
You never know though. It can- I mean,
if you look at the years between 1945 and now, this is the safest we've ever been.
Yeah,
The
for
entire
nuclear war,
world.
yeah.
And it's deterrence.
Yeah, and it is. Deterrence is huge, and so we have to be careful with that with our allies. Because part of our strength of deterrence is NATO.
Yeah.
Those types
I'm gonna
of
scoot this a little
yeah,
closer
those
to
types
you.
of allied organizations that we have. So we've definitely got to be careful of how we maneuver in that space and make sure that we keep those strengths strong for sure.
So what do you think the generational impact of your conflict will be for your boy?
Yeah, it's kind of.
Because
think-
we've already discussed it. It's still going on.
Yeah, it's still going on. Absolutely. I mean, the Middle East is still going on. I mean, you've got, we're still involved. In Afghanistan, we're not. We're over the horizon. In Iraq, we're still involved, fighting ISIS and other radical groups and so on.
And now we've got Iran to worry about.
Yeah, Iran. Then you've got, obviously Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah and all that stuff's going on. So all that's going to be around for a long time. But how that's going to influence my son, Vietnam, Americans, they have this memory of World War II being the good war, right? It's
Yeah.
the war, we defeated the Nazis, we defeated tyranny and Nazism and Imperial Japan and all that stuff. And then they look at Vietnam as kind of like a blemish on our record, if you will. And then we look at the Gulf
It's like
War.
the ugly sisters.
Yeah, then Gulf War, like, yes, we just knocked out Saddam Hussein. I can argue about the Gulf War all day, but I don't think it was the success that we think it was. And then we go into Iraq and Afghanistan. 20 years of counterinsurgency, this constant war that just never seemed to end, still not ended.
Yeah.
So is it going to be forgotten about? I think it's going to become, unfortunately, 20 years from now, if World War III were to break out, of course that would be completely eclipsed by that.
Yeah.
And it'll be another Korea, another Vietnam, another forgotten war. But the influence on my son, I mean, he's going to grow up on movies. He's going to grow up on video games. I think is going to be the biggest influence for him. I think those first shooter games are going to be huge, and he's not going to have a clear understanding of what we did there, or what we were trying to do there. So I think it's going to be a huge influence on him as well.
What are your opinions on those video games?
I don't play video games, so I try not to. We try not to get him involved in those, but I mean it's kind of hard. He's 3 years old, so obviously he hasn't shown any interest yet, but he will because his friends are going to be interested in it and so on. So, I mean they're pretty violent. I mean I knew a guy I was in Iraq with, one of my best friends. Actually I was in the 101st with him too. And so he had real bad PTSD. And then once I went to visit with him and I was hanging out with him and it's like 11 o'clock at night and he's like drinking beer, playing those first shooter games on this huge screen, and it's like 5 feet from him and he's playing this for like hours. And I'm like, dude, like this is why you have PTSD.
Like,
this is why you're still having
Let's go
problems.
outside.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so in that, I don't think it's helpful in that way. Is it too realistic almost, So if he wants to
Do you think
play,
it's preparing a new generation of soldiers?
I think it is, yeah. I mean, those types of movies.
Because we're using FPV drones now,
Yeah.
and those are freaking
Yeah.
certainly cool.
But even exposing them to kind of a warrior ethos, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, that's helpful in that way as well. But is it too violent? Probably for a 6-7-year-old to be, machine gunning crowds of people. Probably, yeah. So will I let him play video games? Yeah, but I think I'm going to try to moderate it the best that I can.
Like I thought that I knew what war looked like. I thought I did, from like we're talking about movies and like Rambo and Missing in Action and Delta
stuff.
Force.
Yeah.
And I thought I knew what war looked like until I watched those damn videos from Ukraine. And it's like,
You're like, holy shit. Yeah.
I mean, you think about GWAT and the terrible shit that happened over there. Mm-hmm. You don't see it as, you don't see mass casualties on both sides.
Yeah,
you just don't. And you don't see craters where you can't tell whose uniform is whose, body parts flying everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people think they understand. People really do think they understand, but they don't.
I think our adversaries saw that. They saw those huge craters. They saw those massive casualties that we didn't see.
Yeah.
We saw a video of a crosshair,
Right.
and then we didn't see anything else. They saw the other end of that. But, when I was an enlisted soldier with the 101st, before the war, before 9/11, again, I thought I knew what war looked like from reading books and movies and so on. And then I saw Saving Private Ryan, if you remember that movie,
Yes.
and the opening scene where they're landing on the beach and that ramp drops. And everybody in the theater I was with who was watching that, it was all a bunch of soldiers. It was at Fort Benning. And we were all like, what the fuck just happened? Like,
Right.
What is that? Like, holy shit. We
and
just
as
did
bad
not
as it-
imagine that was what it was going to be like,
As bad as it looked on screen,
Yeah.
it's 10 times
Oh,
worse
1,000
in
times
person.
worse. Yeah.
I mean, I reading books from people who were there, watching their best friend take a round before the ramps even dropped.
Yeah.
And as soon as they dropped, you knew the first 20 people were dead.
First 5 ranks were gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And
Yeah.
you don't really think about pushing like that, but and what it took to win that war.
Yeah,
and it's not won
Sacrifice,
even.
Yeah. It was huge. The population was asked of every nation that fielded soldiers. I mean, it was huge what was asked of them. Yeah, the greatest generation got that title for a reason, definitely.
Absolutely. And then you look at, something that I say, good times create weak men. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty evident in the United States today.
Yeah, it is. And again, I like to hope that, like I said, the soldiers who were joining after 9/11, a lot of those guys who served, some of them lost limbs and things like that.
I actually know one personally.
Yeah.
He lost all 4.
So yeah. And so those guys, made huge sacrifices for our nation. And so I think we still have that stock there, if you will, that raw American stock that's still evident throughout our society that I think we can still tap into, if World War III were to kick off or some huge threat on the homeland.
I think that's generational too. I think it's in our DNA.
Yeah, I agree. Is
17
it getting worn down some a little bit? Yeah. I think, but it's still-
1776, brother.
Yeah.
We were fleeing tyranny.
Yep.
And that attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been all over the world. You speak to people. Nobody is like us. None of them. Even the countries that have had great times and our allies, they don't carry the attitudes that we carry, the like "fuck you" attitude. We are the world's badasses, and I don't know. You know, you see on social media all the time, people say the United States is the laughing stock of the world. No, we're not. Like
Yeah, they
a
still
lot
look
of
to us for
a lot of them do. Even our allies that are over there talking shit all the time, they're like, "Hey, what do you want to do now? What do you want to do next? How do we proceed with this? Because we don't know what the hell we're doing." And especially like the difference between British people and American people, you see it present itself more with us and them. It's like a brotherhood type mentality,
close cousins,
but at the same time, they're more reserved. They are less in your face about stuff, which as Americans, we don't have to worry about shit like that. So we are loud, we're boisterous, we go and impose, you know, not impose our will, but we kind of travel the world like we people from other countries just can't walk out of their country and not be afraid, whereas we can.
Yeah, you know, being an American soldier, and you wear that American flag patch on your shoulder, and you walk into whatever foreign community. There's still a lot of respect there. There's still a lot of awe towards that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of criticisms that are leveled against Americans that some is fair. But yeah, there still is, you know, a lot of awe, a lot of respect for America and our place in the world and so on. So yeah, you know, 1776, you talk about the American Revolution. And I think we as Americans don't realize, or we underestimate how huge of a global impact our revolution had on the world order from that time. Immediately after that, you had all kinds of people trying to throw off monarchies, and they all pointed to the American Revolution. Ho Chi Minh pointed to the American Revolution and actually wanted to be a partner with America after World War II and after they overthrew the Japanese and so on and the French. So, yeah, there's a huge that American independence movement was just like a spark that changed the world totally after that.
And you visited Estonia.
Yeah, I've been in Estonia.
Yeah. It's kind of
it's
how
in the book. Yeah,
it's kind of how they. I've talked to someone from Estonia, and it's kind of how they feel after the fall of the Soviet Union. It's that they're independent and they're going to stay independent, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and they look to the American Constitution, the American the Bill of Rights, and so on to draft their own documents. Many nations around the world have done that. So.
And a lot of people don't understand like how unique our Constitution is, and how lucky we are to be, I mean, victims of circumstance, right? I mean, we were born here in the United States by pure chance.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand how fucking lucky we are.
No, it's true.
And
advantage of it. Yeah.
How hard people like you and your dad have had to work to keep us on that spot.
Yeah. You drive through Baghdad, you know, my dad through Saigon. I mean, it's like you're just blown away by the poverty and so on.
That's what I wanted to talk about that. I because people ask, you know, what's the biggest difference in the amount of poverty that you see?
It's huge. It's unbelievable.
What kind of poverty did you see?
I mean, not just in my travels around the world too. I mean, not just in Baghdad, but you see just, you know, crazy poverty. I mean, people living in like animals almost that you would not the poorest American community that you can find in the United States would be like the Ritz-Carlton compared to some of those places that you've seen, you know, and just the health issues, just common ailments that could be easily solved from over-the-counter stuff that we can go down here to Walgreens and buy.
Absolutely.
That they can't get there, and their poor kids are suffering because they don't have that, just those types of just basic things, you know, to push through life. So, yeah, the poverty is just huge, you know.
We were talking about like the VC shitting everywhere.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like we don't do that here.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's and I don't think as far as I know, our soldiers don't do it. So
well, we try to dig a hole.
Right.
Didn't do it yet. But,
I find it the people bitching about how life is in the United States. Me included.
Yeah.
I'm no different. I was just bitching the other day because I haven't been on vacation in 2 years. You know, like
some people get a vacation their whole life.
Exactly. It, like imagine how silly I would feel if I was dropped off in the middle of fucking Afghanistan or
Yeah,
Iraq, or
yeah.
imagine how silly I would feel.
Yeah.
But like, man, I thought I had it bad,
Yeah.
and but at least I can go home tonight,
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely I guess, a loss of understanding of that, and I think traveling kind of helps with that again. So for that young person who doesn't quite know what they want to do with their life and wants some more exposure to the world, I mean, join the military. You'll definitely get exposed to all
Exactly.
that
Yeah, I was
stuff.
talking to
Yeah.
somebody the other day about conscription,
Yeah.
and how I understand conscription.
Yeah.
I really do. It's not. I mean, we're very lucky to live.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just said, a Western centric
Yeah.
way of looking at life is having negative feelings towards
Yeah.
conscription.
Yeah.
I understand conscription from an aspect of these boys
Yeah.
need to see
Yeah.
what it's like to be men, and they
Yeah.
got to prepare. And I mean, I don't agree with conscription
Yeah.
here in the United States for war.
Yeah.
But I absolutely think there should be some kind of humanitarian, like
Yeah.
USAID is being,
Yeah.
deconstructed right
right.
now. What if we had something like humanitarian efforts that all high school age kids have to go through?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say, because there's an argument for the positive aspects of conscription, and I see the argument for it, but I agree with you in that it should not be a strictly military thing.
Yeah.
I think if you had every 18-year-old do 1 year, and they had a choice, and there was like a palette of things that they could do, and it's still like going and maybe building roads, like, so learning how to do engineering type things. Maybe that would be one of the avenues they could take. The military would be another one. Maybe teaching in like a rural community. You know what I mean? All
Delivering
types of,
rice to Africa?
I mean, just not even going overseas, just staying within America and helping build roads, helping build out communities, teaching, go working doing an internship in a hospital for a year or whatever it
Absolutely.
is. And that would be, to me, the conscription, and it would be a way to give back to the community, get that bigger exposure to that larger world outside of their small community. I think that would be a good thing. I don't necessarily think that would be a bad thing.
Right. And with my kids, I think about it all the time. Have I made it too easy for them?
Yeah.
Because I got a 21-year-old son.
Nice.
Like I know my kids range in ages. My oldest is 22 and my youngest is 5.
Nice.
So
Yeah, I got 1 3-year-old. That's it.
well, count yourself lucky.
Yeah.
I wish I wish everybody could have a child or that wants to be a parent. I wish everybody could experience that. Multiple children are for special kinds of people.
Yeah, I agree.
But I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, with my kids, I made it too easy. My 21-year-old son, who moved out last year, he's now finding how difficult it is to live on your own. And you remember what it was like to be 17, 18 years old. Shit was cheap for us.
Yeah.
My rent when I was 21 was $400 a month.
Yeah, you can't find that anymore.
Exactly. He's paying $1,400.
Oof, jeez.
And so it's like I have to remember, like, things were a lot easier for me when I was that age, especially financially. When we were going through hell at that time. It was let's see, it was 06, 07.
Yeah.
I mean, so here in the United States, we had economic troubles.
Yeah.
The gas was $3.50, $4 a gallon. So I had my own shit that I was going through. But these kids today, man, the cost of insurance is more than your car payment.
I know.
And I have to remember all that stuff when I'm talking to them.
Yeah,
Why don't you go out there and get a car? What- It's with the boomer way of looking at things. Like, I have to try not to be a boomer with my kids, and remember that. But have we made life too easy for them?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, does my son have it easy? I don't know. He's 3 years old, so it's like, to me he does, but
Right.
he's 3. But yeah, I know. I see what you're saying. I'm from Hawaii, and so the culture in Hawaii, because it's so expensive, is that the expectation that you turn 18 and then you just move out on your own is just not there, just because it's not a
Right.
reality. So everybody in Hawaii, so like I'm 46, so people my age who I grew up with still live at home. And it's like an Asian way that they live. They have like a house, and in one room is grandma and grandpa, another room is mom and dad, and then the two kids, whatever,
Yeah.
they're married, and everybody lives in the same house, and it's not weird, it's
Yeah,
not
it's like that in
strange.
South America too.
Yeah, it's like they're just supporting each other. And so I think maybe we have to, maybe twist our mindset a little bit and understand that we never can go back to, hey, you're 18-year-old, go out and figure it out on
Right.
your own, that we're going to have to do it as a community maybe.
How do we convince our kids to come back home? Because now my house isn't big enough for all of us,
Yeah.
but man, I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
I think about villages, and as a matter of fact, I got a podcast episode about a year ago. It's like, where's my village?
Yeah.
I didn't have a village growing up.
Yeah.
Like I had to take care of my kids on my own. I didn't have, like, my mom was my babysitter for a while, but I had to pay her,
Yeah.
and back in the day, and in South America and Asian countries, they have villages, man,
yeah.
where if you need to go to work,
Yep.
one person stays behind and takes
Yeah,
care of
yeah.
all the kids of the entire village. We don't have that shit here.
Yeah, that's a hard thing with the military. If you try to raise a family in the military, is, we don't have an aunt or an uncle. Like,
Right.
say, hey, can you watch? I drop off my son real quick. Can you watch him for a couple hours? We don't have that at all. So there's no village for us, in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's challenging. And how do you build that out? Because like, how do you, like the small rural communities across Kansas and Missouri, like.
Yeah.
How do you keep a child there because there's no employment for them? And
Exactly,
so then they're going to have to
exactly.
go to the big city or wherever, get an employment, and they're not going to have that village. They're not going to have grandma and grandpa to come over to help and so on, just at the spur of the moment. So yeah, that's kind of disappearing a little bit.
I think it's urbanization.
Yeah, for sure.
You talked a little bit about that in your book as well.
Yeah.
Urbanization, getting people closer to the cities. I
Yeah.
think that the closer you get to cities,
Yeah.
people stop being that way.
Yeah,
And then when you go outside in
Yeah.
the rural areas,
Yeah.
the kids are still looked at as like help. You have children to help.
Yeah.
And here in 2025, it's still looked at like that in the United States.
But I will say that it's changing a little bit. Like you're starting to see these smaller communities get revitalized. So, like for around here, you see, like you talked about St. Joseph, they're trying to revitalize the downtown.
Yeah.
It's the same with the town of Leavenworth. They're trying to like build these little communities where young people are going to want to come back, and they're trying to build like these collective workspaces and things like that, so they don't have to. They can work out of these collective workspaces versus having their own office where they have to pay rent and all those types of things. So there's like a movement out there, I think, to revitalize some of these smaller communities, to try to rebuild those villages, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Weston. Weston's right down the road. That's another, place that's really has gotten that right.
There's
I think.
there's a couple cool places in Weston I've never been. There's this pub there that's underground. I got to go there.
Oh,
I've
I haven't been to that one,
there. I've never been there, and I just learned about it a couple months ago. But apparently, there's an old Irish pub, and it's like in a basement.
I haven't seen that. We go to eat barbecue there sometimes. It's
Hell
pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. But it's speaking of barbecue. You ever been to Korea?
No.
So
I love Korean barbecue. Yeah.
my best friend, we were talking about my best friend. He spent a lot of time in Korea, and he goes down to Leavenworth all the time for VA visits.
Okay.
And he always stops at there's this Korean restaurant there. He always stops at. He has to tell me about it because
Yeah,
he
I've
took
been to that
me in
one.
there one time, and I had
Yeah.
the best kimchi I've ever had. And so I was telling, I can't remember who I was telling that was down there in Leavenworth the other day, and I was like, "Hey, there's a nice Korean restaurant down there that my buddy swears by."
Yeah.
So, but down there in Leavenworth, can't remember the name of the place, but it's a little hole in the wall. They got a little Korean,
I'll have to look for that.
a little Korean store connected to
yeah.
it. Yeah,
They have a Thai place that's really good there. Ban Thai. is
I've
really
only
good.
had Thai once.
Oh, it's good.
And it was down in Kansas City. So, and this was years ago. So I don't remember what it tastes like. But I am now a fan of weird shit.
Okay.
Because like when I travel, and I've never traveled outside the United States, but when I do travel, I try to eat things and go places where I can't go at home.
Yeah.
And so like we try not to eat like McDonald's or Applebee's
Yeah, we like
or
junk, yeah.
right. And we try to eat at places like where we've never been or that we can't get at home. And so like that's one of the things that I've always been into as traveling. But the older I get, I was a picky eater when I was a kid, and that was because I lived around a bunch of people who couldn't cook. And so once I got older and I was like, oh, that's what that really tastes like?
Yeah.
No, let me have that. And then as you get older, your taste buds change and
your
stuff.
taste, your interests,
And so I'm like, there's these snack boxes that you can get from like Japan and stuff like
the bentos.
I'm always wanting to try stuff like that because like, and then you'll find in there, like there's a bag of chips that's flavored like fish. And I forgot what that, the fish snack that you were talking about. That's
Cuttlefish.
Cuttlefish.
Yeah.
Yes. I've never had that.
It's good.
Now I want to try it.
Yeah, it's good.
So that's amazing that.
Yeah, I was, in Hawaii, it's very Asian influenced food. So I grew up on, all kinds of crazy stuff. And like we grew up on rice. We didn't eat potatoes, and that's like the staple in Hawaii is everybody eats rice.
That's funny. Like we got a little Hawaiian place up the road. Hawaiian Brothers restaurant.
Yeah, I know that place.
And we stopped there, and it was like I got I can't remember what the meat was.
Yeah.
But it was just meat and then rice.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's called a plate lunch.
this is like boring.
In Hawaii, it's called a plate lunch.
Yeah. So what's it like growing up in Hawaii, man?
No, I mean, it's like anywhere, you don't realize what you have until you leave. You don't realize you're in paradise until you leave, and then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that was pretty good.
I think about that all the time. I think about like, oh, moving away from here. But we're in kind of a unique area right here because we're close enough to Kansas City, but far enough away from Kansas City where we don't have Kansas City's problems.
Yeah.
So we are in kind of a unique space. Here in St. Joseph, we were largely insulated from the COVID issues because we had a lot of people here that understood that we don't care how much it costs, get it to us.
Yeah.
And they would disrupt their own supply chains to go outside their supply line and get us toilet paper, eggs, whatever we need. And they just pay higher prices and then pass that down to us.
Yeah.
As an American, I'm used to it.
Right.
So we were largely insulated from those problems. Our restaurants, it's a different story. A lot of restaurants closed here.
Oh, really?
But when we shut down, we didn't stay shut down for very long.
Yeah.
And that thankfully.
DC, we were in DC. It was shut down for a year and a half, probably.
Yeah. I went to California, dude.
Yeah.
I know. I love California because it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Everything was really cool. The weather is really nice. And we went out there during the COVID lockdowns, and so we were so lucky we did because like everything was closed. We were out in San Francisco. You could walk down the street by yourself.
Nice.
It was really, really nice. There was no traffic. You go out on the 101 and it smooth sailing. You could drive 101 on 101.
Nice.
And so like that's what we did. We rented a Mustang, a convertible, and then we drove. It was a great time.
That's awesome.
But yeah, the COVID shutdowns here weren't as bad. And like cigarette stores, dude, cigarette stores would get like a stack of toilet paper and put a obscene price on it, like $20 a roll.
Yeah, jeez.
But since they had toilet paper, they could remain open because they were now, how did they put that?
What was the word?
It wasn't necessary, but you know what I mean.
I forget the word. Yeah.
Yeah. They were essential.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, they could remain open because they were essential. We had all the businesses in this town doing shit like that.
Nice.
And they would just as so they could stay open. Cigarette stores, of course, liquor stores. Liquor stores were already considered essential, so they didn't have to worry about anything like that. But it blew my mind how much of that stuff was happening.
Well, it was a different experience for depending on wherever you were in the country. It's a totally different
Seattle,
experience.
man. I saw videos of Seattle where there was nobody out on the roads, and then a group took some four-wheelers and go-karts on one of the major highways in Seattle.
Nice.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what time of day it is. You can't do that in Seattle.
Oh, they do that in DC all the time.
Really?
Yeah, it's really bad.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's horrible, actually. Oh.
I'm one of those. sometimes I cheer for chaos as it's happening. If I'm being like, you remember, what year was it? It was like, I can't remember. You remember George Floyd, or not
Yeah,
George
yeah.
Floyd, Michael, shit. Anyway, Ferguson, Missouri,
Yeah, yeah.
St. Louis.
Does Floyd, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
2014, I think it was maybe. Anyway, as they're, as this stuff is happening down there, I was kind of like, fuck, the city of St. Louis is burning down. Let's watch. I was addicted to the TV.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know why I do that, but I don't think I'm alone in doing that.
No, they call it doom scrolling.
Yes.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
wife's doing that right now.
That's funny.
Yeah, I try to keep her away from that. Yeah, it's very addictive. It gets you sucked in.
Yeah.
And that's what they want, because then they can sell ads and sell products
Exactly.
and things like that. So you're getting sucked into that. Yeah.
And I fell into the trap, the BLM trap, and I was like, Black Lives Matter, and then like now I look at it for what it was. It's a Hearts and Minds campaign.
Yeah.
And
Well, historians will have a field day with the past 10 years for
Yeah,
sure. And then the
absolutely.
next 10 years forward. Yeah. It's going to be an
Absolutely.
interesting time. Yeah.
especially like, I mean, when the government can come out and say, hey, UFOs are real, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's a weird fucking day.
Yeah.
It is a weird day. And for the life of me, I can't remember, I can't remember a time where it's ever been like this hilarious, but sad at the same fucking time,
It's concerning. Yeah.
Like, you look at the world out there, and not only the United States, but the world as a whole, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And then, but part of us, war tourists, like
Yeah.
those people
Yeah,
exist.
it's hard to shock us now.
It is.
Yeah.
It is hard to shock us. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Like the things that you saw back in, let's say, 03, 04. The things that you saw in 03 and 04 shocked you back
Yeah,
then. Would they
yeah.
shock you now?
Probably not. No, it'd just be like, oh, okay.
Right.
Continuation.
This is what
of
we're doing now.
Yeah.
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 That's amazing that time progresses like that. It's absolutely insane. You brought
Yeah.
a couple helmets. You brought your service helmet from
Yep.
Iraq, and you brought a Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam. So this is the helmet I wore in Iraq. So eventually I'll have to turn this in once I retire from the Army. But for now, I've got it, which is kind of cool. So yeah, then I've got the helmet that my dad would have worn in Iraq. And so I keep them behind me at my desk. I've got them on like a little stand behind me.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of cool because, like you, I'm trying to figure out this whole, podcasting, social media type space
Yeah.
and so I kind of have it behind me if I talk about the book during the podcast on video,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of cool.
I would proudly display these
Yeah.
on behind your desk, and,
Yeah.
and this one, I mean, it won't have your name on it, but you can
Yeah,
you
we
can
get another one, I'm
get a
sure. Yeah,
replacement,
but it would be really cool if I could keep it, for the.
I would
if the Army let me
ask
do
them,
it,
be
yeah.
like, here it is, can I buy it?
Yeah, you can. I think it's like $700 or something.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Well, never mind.
Yeah, I know. And then this is my dad took this off a dead Viet Cong.
And this is in the book as well.
It is, yeah. And so basically, it's this guy's name here, Pam Van Coy. It's a name of like a revolutionary in their local community. So it's like saying you're the John Wayne Company, or you're the name any famous military person. You're the Audie Murphy Company. That's basically what the flag is. It's saying I'm this company that's named after this famous revolutionary fighter from their small community. And then this is just
Tell us about this, man.
Yeah, so this is it says danger, and it was the danger booby traps. And so my dad came into a Vietnamese village, and this was like, hanging up on a wall, not a wall, but like on a tree or something, or a fence post, I think. And he grabbed it and was like, oh, cool souvenir, and, and threw it in his pocket. Not knowing, he's fresh into country, not knowing that the Viet Cong would purposely leave things out like this, booby trap, because they knew that Americans loved getting souvenirs, and they would try to pick it up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until his sergeant told him later, like, hey, don't pick up anything that looks interesting because it's probably booby trapped. And he was like, oh shit,
When you
I've got
brought
this
this
in my
in-
pocket.
When you brought this in and brought it out of your bag, I got goosebumps, man.
Oh yeah, nice.
because not only what it is, but the story behind it.
Yeah.
And you know, what could have happened.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it had been booby trapped, I wouldn't be here today, probably.
Exactly.
Which is interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, that still exists. There's a bunch of things that he has. I know I just bought a couple items, but then things that I've got I brought back from Iraq. And a lot of them are just like in a chest that I keep behind my desk, and
Yeah.
my things are getting added to that. So for my son, one day he'll get that and have like this whole treasure chest of stuff to dig through, which, that's what influenced me, and, was finding all this stuff, in little hidden quarters. When you're a kid, you like to dig through your parents' stuff secretly, and you
Yeah.
would find, things like this, not really knowing what they are or what they meant. So all that stuff's probably going to influence him as well.
So your dad, the last mission he went on, the rescue mission,
Yeah.
Sergeant Brown,
Gary Brown. Yep.
your dad had to go through his footlocker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is another moment that made me chuckle.
Yeah.
He had to go through his footlocker and remove anything offensive before he
Yeah.
sent it home. Why do you guys do that?
Well, I mean, the property is going to go home to the family, and the family's gonna get it and open it and go through it. So if there's some titty mags in there or something, it's obviously not in good taste,
Right.
So you just go through and just take out any of that stuff that could be.
Sergeant
perceived
Brown
bad,
definitely
yeah.
thanks your father for that.
Yeah, hopefully.
You know,
I don't really know what he pulled out of there.
For
If
us,
anything, yeah.
for us, it's clear my history.
Yeah,
for me,
right. Clear
you know.
history on your phone. Yeah, definitely. So a little different. Yeah.
It made me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it's sad.
Yeah.
Sergeant Brown was your dad's friend,
Yep.
and as soon as he heard what was going on,
Yeah.
without thinking about himself, he wore his flak jacket,
Yeah.
which he never
Yeah.
wears.
Yeah.
He wore his flak jacket. He put on his jacket, jumped in a bird,
Yep.
and went to help a friend.
Yeah. Went to coordinator. He didn't have to do that. He was done. He was basically done, taking off all missions. You're going home in a couple days. You don't have to do anything. But he heard about that. Heard over the radio that there was an American advisor killed from that team, and he knew who it was. So he immediately, just on his own, organized a rescue mission, hopefully. And then jumped in the bird, went and landed, and found Sergeant Brown already dead, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so was able to basically rescue his body at that point. That's all he could do.
Your dad found him naked.
Yeah, he was stripped naked. Yep.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah, I mean, it was the ARVN.
Why was he naked?
Yeah, so the South Vietnamese Army, the ARVN, the Army Republic of the Vietnam, they called them ARVN. They kind of have a bad rep. History has remembered them as maybe being cowards or not so efficient soldiers and so on. My dad's experience, if you talk to a lot of ARVN advisors, which my dad was, that's not actually true. They were actually quite capable fighters. It was more of their senior leadership who wasn't
Yeah.
as capable and kind of let them down. But the rank and file were actually quite, they were tigers on the battlefield. But at the same time, there was an ugly side to it as well. They didn't quite follow Geneva Convention as closely as we did. I talk about a lot of the torturing of prisoners and things like that in the book.
Yeah.
But so Sergeant Brown was killed. Their government did not quite supply them as efficiently as the American Army was. So they basically stripped him naked, and they took his boots, they took his uniform, they took his watch, they took the money, and he had his wallet. They took everything off of him because of greed, basically. And he was just laying there naked. And then, they were confronted. And, at first they couldn't quite figure out, why is he naked?
Yeah.
And then when they saw the ARVN kind of avoiding making eye contact with them and so on, they figured out, pretty quickly what had happened to him. So
Somebody stole his damn boots.
yeah, somebody stole his boots. They got all that stuff back, but unfortunate incident again. Thought very highly of the ARVN soldiers, but that was like one of those things that was kind of like, what the fuck did you guys do?
Yeah.
And so one of the guys my dad served with, another ARVN advisor, basically threatened them and said, if you don't give us back all this stuff right now, we're not going to go on another mission with you. We're not going to have a rate. We're not going to. The power that the ARVN advisor bought to that ARVN unit was the radio.
Yeah.
So you could call for fire, you could call for artillery, you could call for medevacs. He's like, we're not going to do any of that shit if you don't give us all that stuff back. And so immediately, all the stuff came back.
Slowly, one item by
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Tell you a little bit of personal shit about me. I've just told you a little bit about, drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
I smoke pot. I smoke pot every day. I self-medicate with marijuana. And I remember parts of your book, bro.
Yeah. Nice.
That's how well written it is.
Oh, nice.
And I
Nice.
read a lot.
Yeah.
I study a lot. I do a lot of talking.
Yeah.
And I remember specific parts of your book.
Yeah.
Another part that I want to talk about, a couple parts. I want to talk about Christmas in Iraq.
Yeah,
You know the part that I'm talking about, the saxophone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think you want to tell that story?
Yeah. So that actually wasn't in Iraq. That was that was Fort Campbell.
Okay, Fort Campbell. Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of just, another one of those little interesting
I'm
stories.
conflating two different
Yeah.
stories because I wanted to talk to you about your first day in Iraq.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So,
No, the saxophone. I mean, that was kind of one of those kind of surreal things. It's kind of, it sticks out in your head when you think back on your life and so on. So, we're in the 101st Airborne, enlisted soldiers. We're not allowed to go home for Christmas because we're on an 18-hour recall. All the units, the crack units in the Army they'll take turns being on a recall. In case something happens in the world, they can immediately deploy them. So it was our turn for that Christmas. So, everybody was in the barracks, lonely, obviously. It's snowing and everybody's kind of the battling of radios, if you will. We're all young kids in our barracks room, and, one room was like the country guys blasting country music. One room was blasting rap music. Another room's blasting heavy metal, and everybody's kind of, as that's the way it always is, competing with each other. Anyway, this other sound kind of started wafting in over the top of that, and we were like, what is that noise? And slowly, the radios started getting turned off one by one, and everybody started looking out the window, and then there was a guy, a soldier somewhere, marched out into the middle of the barracks. And the barracks, there's this huge structure, kind of looks like a little mini city almost, with all these high-rise towers of just barracks of soldiers living in them, thousands of soldiers. And he marched out into the middle of the quad, which is like this big field where we had formations and so on. And he had a saxophone, and he was playing, what song was that? Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, I think it was, yeah. And he was playing that, and it was like everybody just stopped and listened, and he was just playing that, and it was snowing at the same time, and this sound is very like kind of eerie sound, that song getting played across all the barracks.
And of course,
everybody.
I'm sure he played with a slower tempo.
Yeah, very slow tempo, yeah, and you could see everybody just instantly were thinking about home at that point, and it was just kind of one of those really surreal moments. And then when he stopped the song, and he just marched off, and then everybody just kind of for a second took it in and started playing the songs again.
Before I said Iraq, I should have remembered Christmas time. There was snow.
Yeah,
it's definitely not.
It gets cold in Iraq.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it snowed when I was there, but it does. Not often. Yeah,
but it's kind of like snow in Vegas. Sometimes it happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and again, this is all in the book, and I encourage everybody to go read this damn book. This is. April 15th, it'll be coming out.
Yes, sir.
And I can't, again, your book is amazing, man.
Oh,
you did a wonderful job. The research, the care, the love that you put into the amount of research that you did. And the people, like you reached out to these people.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And you talked to them, and you tried to find even the people that passed on, some of their friends and family.
Yeah, I tried. Some didn't want to talk to me, and that's fine, and I totally respect that. But yeah, I did, definitely did.
So I wanted to talk to you about your first day in Iraq. It was kind of comical in the book. I didn't know about all the rocket attacks.
Yeah, it was constant. Yeah.
I spoke to a GWAT veteran a couple months ago, and he explained to me that incoming.
Yeah.
What is that like to hear that?
Yeah, I mean, the first time it's kind of same thing. It's kind of like, wait, what is that? You can train for it and so on. And then the first time, there's these loudspeakers for everybody who doesn't know. There's these loudspeakers so we have these, these bases that we're on. They call them FOBs, so forward operating bases. It's the same thing as Vietnam with the fire-based construct. Exact same thing.
Reminds me of a funny word.
Yeah, the FOBits. Yeah. So we're all on these bases, and so we're kind of like packed into these little fire bases that are have razor wire all around them and so on, and protected. So it makes an easy target for insurgents just to launch mortars, rockets, whatever they can throw at us. So this is like a constant thing in Iraq and Afghanistan that happened all the time.
I had no idea
about
that.
So they had these loudspeakers that would, they had, like basically like ground radars that would sense, and they had microphones that would pick up a blast of a motor round or something, and that's what would trigger, the incoming, and this loudspeaker would say that 3 times real loud. and then everybody would, you'd kind of react wherever the heck you were, you'd have to react to it. And then there was a CRAM, which is basically, it was designed for ships, and it was like, it looked kind of like R2-D2 with like a gun.
If y'all don't know what a CRAM is, look it up, because it's cool.
It's pretty intense, and so that thing would instantly go into action, and it would try to shoot these rockets and these motor rounds down, and it's literally like a movie. It would like shoot, like, I don't know what it is, 1,000 rounds a minute or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Try to knock these things out of the sky.
Freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So the first day I'm there, we're doing what's called a right seat, left seat with our unit that we're replacing. So they're kind of like trying to dump their brain into ours as they go out the door or go back home, and we're taking over the mission. So we're kind of doing all that, and then that happens, incoming, and you're like, wait, what?
And then you look around,
everybody just jumps on the ground, and so you're like, oh shoot, so you jump on the ground too, you protect your ears and your eyes with your hands, just in case, and then you just wait, and you just sit there and wait, well, you don't know if the rocket's going to land on your head. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen, and sometimes the CRAM blasted out of the sky. Sometimes it doesn't, and you hear the impact and you feel the impact, on the ground. Even if it's not near you, you can still feel the ground shake, So yeah, it's kind of a surreal experience for sure. The first time it happens,
Yeah, I when I read that, like, I was like, I don't even know how I'd react to that. Like, and there was another part in the book where you said you were standing real close to the CRAM.
Yeah, the CRAM went right off over my head and basically just like threw me to the ground without
even... Did you feel it in your
chest?
Oh,
yeah, you feel it hugely. But, it's interesting because, you talk about FOBITs, people who never left the FOB.
And rear area motherfuckers.
Rear echelon. Same thing in Vietnam. They're called rear echelon motherfuckers, ramps. So it's, trauma affects people differently. So I used to think of people who, only got murdered on rockets and think like, well, how can you claim that you have PTSD or you were scared? But everybody reacts to that different, like just laying on the ground, trying to make yourself as low as you can to the ground and just waiting for this rocket that might land on your head. I mean, that can be scary as hell for somebody.
Oh yeah.
And so some people just process that differently, and so now I'm not so critical, of those people because I realize that it's a different experience for every single person, whoever went to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Absolutely. I try to remind my kids of that, because they're all the time talking. I don't know if you've noticed, but like in the last few years, we've got, of course, it's trauma this, trauma that. Everybody's got trauma. And I mean, it's so fucking annoying. But at the same time, everybody does process trauma differently. And we have to remember that because something that was a big deal to me may not be a big deal to you because of your experiences. And that's, I mean, that is something that we all have to kind of think about. And it kind of really made me laugh. But the FOBIT, I call my oldest son, I call him a hobbit because he's short. He's like 5'8", so it's like 5'7", 5'8", something like that.
He's taller than me.
Well, I mean, but I'm huge compared to him. And my 15-year-old son, who's in the other room, he's like 6 foot tall. So he's the shortest person of the family. So I call him a hobbit. But it just made me laugh. And then rear area motherfuckers, the balls that you and your dad have. Your dad had trench foot.
Yeah, he had all kinds of problems.
and then you with your broken metatarsal. As I'm reading that, and I'm like, man, I wouldn't give a shit what my guys were going through if I had trench foot. And I mean, obviously, if I was there, I probably feel different. But not necessarily even the balls, just the intestinal fortitude.
Yeah, it's a different mentality for sure. In the military, and I think they beat that into you, in whatever basic training you go to, and so on.
Well, because I mean, if you're not out there, somebody else is having to do your job.
Someone else got to do it. Yeah, and so it's definitely a different mindset completely. That willingness to push through injuries and things like that a normal person would be like, no, I got to go to the doctor and I got to take off work or whatever.
Right.
So it's definitely a different mindset for sure. And it can kind of hurt you in the long run too, because you ignore problems that you probably should get checked out for.
Right.
And that's why you have veterans who get out who have all kinds of knee and back problems and things like that they didn't get taken care of when they should have.
I know people that like hurt their legs really bad and didn't address it until after, and then I know a couple people draw on disability because they can't hardly walk. And they're 30.
Yeah, so that's
know?
what one of the things I put in the book is if you got an injury, man, go to sick call and get it taken care of. Honestly,
Absolutely.
in the middle of combat, obviously you can't do that. But if you're like in a lull or whatever, you're in a garrison environment, like don't push through it. Go and get it checked out. And so you
Absolutely.
don't get hurt.
I concur. Man, I don't know how the hell you did it. You're like broken
I know. I
metatarsal.
just
That's
didn't
a
want
big
to.
deal.
I know. I didn't want to go home. I was like, oh,
and of course,
my
your
God.
dad's deal. Your dad's deal was even worse. Trench foot, man.
I
He could
know.
have died from that.
I know. He had all kinds of problems. He got bit by a rabbit that had rabies when he was in Vietnam.
So
kinds of
what's it
crazy
like
stuff.
finding out your dad's a badass?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you kind of, like I said, growing up as a kid, you have things like this lying around, so you kind of suspected. And then he had these old medals that he had all tucked away, and so you kind of read some of those write-ups. And then when you read them as a kid, they kind of read as a Rambo movie again.
Oh, yeah.
When, like you said earlier, when you read them as an adult, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, it wasn't quite what I remembered as a kid.
Right,
But it
right.
still was pretty intense. Yeah. And so, it's interesting because, he's a real humble, quiet guy. And you would not expect that.
And then you
he's
talk
like
to his friends. And
yeah,
then
and they're
you're
all like, oh, dude, your dad was like the baddest dude there. They're Vietnam, like you're just like, really?
and the stories that you're telling about your dad in the book, I'm just like, I gotta know this guy.
Yeah,
Like,
he's a good dude.
it's what you think of when you think of a man.
Yeah, absolutely. yeah.
Soldier or not.
Yeah.
That's the shit that we do
Yeah, the
as
tough
men.
stuff.
That's all
Yeah.
that's the stuff that we do. And I can just imagine, before you went into the military, what you would be like if one of your friends needed your help here.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to go,
Right, right, yeah.
especially if it's like a big fight or whatever,
Yeah,
you're going to go.
exactly. Yeah.
And to have that mentality on a battlefield.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Americans are good at that. We make good soldiers for some reason.
I was telling people, like, you don't want a big son of a bitch like me fighting in a trench next to you. I'll get you killed.
Yeah.
But
That's good. You're good to hide behind. You're good.
Yeah, the spirit's there. The
Yeah,
spirit's
yeah.
there. I mean, let's just say, like Red Dawn.
Yeah.
A situation like Red Dawn. I mean,
Yeah.
it could happen.
Yeah, and that's one of the, I guess, the protection points of America is, we have geography, which protects us, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us so powerful, really, is kind of at the root of why we're so powerful, because we have that geography protecting us. We have two massive oceans. We're surrounded by two allies who are no threat. And then
We got a desert to the south,
we got
mountains
lots
to
of
the
natural
north.
resources, things like that, agricultural-wise, minerals and all that stuff. So we're a very unique country in history for that reason.
Did you ever study Manifest Destiny?
A little bit,
The
yeah.
Great Westward
Yeah,
Expansion, Sea to Shining Sea. That's why we did that.
Yeah, to gain all that for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
security too. So, yeah, it's interesting. But then that other thing that protects us from an adversary is our firearm possession. Because
there's
Red Dawn it would be a real
there's
thing.
a gun
Yeah.
behind every blade of grass.
Exactly. Yeah. And so looking back again at 1776, that's one of those like myths that we love of that Minuteman who grabbed that musket off of his mantle and ran out and fought the British. And so that myth is still there for Americans. So yeah, so if somebody invaded America, something like that very much would happen. And it would be the first Red Dawn movie, not the second one, because the second one was horrible, or the remake, but the first one, yeah.
I really enjoyed the Red Dawn movie. And I feel like every red-blooded American can identify with the Wolverines.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We will fuck
there's
you up.
so many American units who call themselves the Wolverines because of that movie,
Yeah. And I can just imagine, like, I don't even know how many veterans we have in this country, but it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
And I mean, what is our standing military? Over 1 million?
Yeah, around 1 million. Mm-hmm.
That's wild.
Yeah. But you can,
All
our
volunteer
population,
forces.
I don't even know what we're at now.
330 somewhere,
something
I
like
think.
that. Yeah. So you look at it from that perspective, it's really not that much.
No, but I mean, compared to
The other countries, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and the amount of support that our military
That's one
gets
thing we
is,
do
is
have, yeah.
hugely different between us and other countries.
we're one of the last probably trusted institutions fully, still within the U.S. for sure.
And actually, we've got policies coming down the pike that might change a little bit of that. But I am all for more defense spending.
Yeah.
I don't think we spend enough.
Yeah, we probably could spend more. There's a lot more. There's definitely room for improvement and restructuring a little bit.
Donald
stuff,
Trump wants an Iron Dome for the United
that would
States.
be expensive. That would be hard to do.
I don't even know how I don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, that would be pretty hard to
because
do,
I mean, you
yeah.
know how small Israel is.
Yeah.
And could you imagine
Yeah.
every inch of the coastline, every
Yeah.
inch of the borders
Yeah.
being protected by an Iron Dome? That's
It'd
a
be
lot
hard.
of fucking
I think
money.
I think you could do it over major population centers.
Yeah,
Even that one. Even
for
that would be
sure,
hard.
for sure.
But yeah.
I think they probably do.
Yeah.
And you know, one of those things about the CRAMs that you were talking about, that they were designed for ships. I wonder when they thought about taking them off the ship and putting them on a
Yeah,
flatbed.
I'm not sure like when that actually, like did that happen right away in Afghanistan or Iraq? I'm not sure.
Because I'll tell you, when I thought about it, was seeing the shit in Ukraine.
Yeah.
By the time I looked it up, I was thinking about it for a couple hours, and then I looked it up on Google, and apparently it's already a thing.
Yeah.
You guys used them in '03 over in Iraq, and
Yeah.
in '01 in Afghanistan
Yeah.
for forward operating bases.
Yeah.
I just never thought
Yeah.
about that until I was watching I think it was like 400 rockets all at
Yeah,
once coming
yeah.
into Ukraine. And I was like, you know what would solve that?
Yeah.
They were talking about Iron Dome at that time.
Yeah.
And I was like, just put a fucking CRAM out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. The only drawback with CRAM is, what goes up must come down.
Yes.
So if you're firing
yes.
it over major population centers, it's going to go, brrr, then it's going to go whoop,
Right.
down into whatever,
And then those CRAMs can only reach so far.
Yeah, they
and
can
I
only
think
reach so
Iron
far,
Dome
yeah.
has Iron Dome tries to do its best to eliminate what's happened,
Yeah.
what's fallen to the
Destroy
ground
the
as well.
warhead. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that would be really cool if we could do
Yeah.
something like that.
It'd be hard as heck. It'd be expensive. That's for sure. But, yeah.
And I know we only have I think I'm wanting to say 40 some interceptor systems.
Well, it's, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier about the evolutions that the military goes through and, observing other conflicts and stuff. So before Iraq and Afghanistan, everybody, I write about it in the book too, everybody said the day of the infantry was over.
Yeah.
And then you had Iraq and Afghanistan. It was like, oh shoot, we need more infantry, we need more MPs and more convoy, type scenarios, type capabilities. When they said all that stuff is done, we're just gonna bomb everything from afar. The Air Force is gonna take care of it. Strategic bombing.
An Abrams tank.
Yeah.
they want to do away with the Abrams.
Yeah. So all that stuff, goes through that cyclic. And so now, we went from a counterinsurgency focus, and now we're going back to focusing on, peer threats between China and Russia, and we need tanks and we need infantry and we need all that stuff. So yeah.
But I forget the word for it, but like unbalanced warfare.
Counterinsurgency.
Yeah, stuff like that. I think it would be wise to keep up on that stuff.
Oh yeah,
too.
absolutely. Yeah. We still are. Yeah.
And just looking at the mistakes on the battlefield and other places right now,
Yeah.
you can see the need for
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we need an Abrams X tank, but damn, couldn't hurt,
Yeah.
with all the turrets popping
Yeah.
off, and I'm sure they're going to develop something that can
Yeah.
beat our tanks.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, they've been trying to work against them since the
Yeah.
70s.
I mean, you have the most dangerous, threat course of action is of course that high end conflict, but the most likely conflict that we're going to see is probably future counterinsurgency type stuff.
Yeah.
And even when you so say we were to fight China and we were to do it in China, I mean, once that front line moved forward, I mean, everything behind is still going to have counterinsurgency type stuff that you're going to have to deal with. So yeah, that's always going to be a threat that we've got to be good at.
You said fighting in China.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be ugly.
What does that even look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to struggle with,
It's going to
you know?
be air and navy for sure
Yeah.
for right now, but
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, that type of scenario, I mean, that's wild.
I mean, essentially it was the reason for, Fat Man and Little Boy.
Yeah.
Was so we didn't have to go on the island.
Yeah. And so that's a wild scenario. It really is.
and you think of the size difference between China and
Yeah, I
Japan.
know, yeah.
Holy shit.
Holy smokes, it's huge.
But I hope it never comes to that. I really don't. And I think maybe there's that's some of the stuff that's going on with the rhetoric towards Russia right now.
Yeah.
Is we needed their help during World War II. The Lend-Lease thing.
Yeah.
That time may be coming again.
Yeah, the Russians bore the brunt of the casualties against the Nazis, that's for sure.
Yeah, they sure did. And like a lot of people think like, hey, we won World War II.
Yeah,
And that's a
they
very
forget about the
Western
Russians.
way
Yeah,
to
the
look
Soviets,
at things.
yeah.
And the Brits are like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
We did. And the Russians are like, the fuck are you guys talking about?
Yeah. I mean, if you array like just the casualty count, with the American British French against the Russians,
Yeah.
I mean the Russians are like just through the roof. They
Millions.
they really bore the brunt of the Nazi onslaught for sure.
And then you go and you talk about, like we talked about it earlier. Do we need to be involved in that war? I mean, I say yes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if not, the difference between national thinking, and wanting, America first. The difference between Hitler and what America first, Hitler wanted to dominate the world.
Yeah.
Hitler wanted to take over.
Yeah.
He wanted everybody to be speaking German.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, if you're reading back in the history books, Hitler didn't want anything to do with the United States because of who we are. However, given a chance, let him get that big.
Yeah.
Let him conquer Europe. Where would he have gone then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question, right? He would have eventually Great Britain would have fell, and he probably would have taken that as well. But would he have come over to United States? I don't know. It's a fair argument. It really is. But all the loss of life that would have happened behind that German wall would have been huge. We had to get involved. I really do believe that we had to get involved.
And what's so great about what we did was, like, we were fighting on two fronts.
Yeah,
We were fighting in the Pacific Theater and Europe.
Yeah.
And you don't hear very many success stories coming out of something like that. As a matter of fact, Operation Barbarossa.
Yeah.
I mean, Hitler tried to open up another front, and it fucked him.
And it was a big
and
failure.
When you were in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom, can you teach logistics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the intent, for both what we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan was to train the Iraqis and the Afghans to take over for themselves, so that they could then continue to fight, protect their borders, fight against Islamic extremism and so on. So same thing with Vietnam, right? Can we train the South Vietnamese to provide for
and
their own
that's actually
security
why
as
I'm
well?
asking that question, is because there's so many similarities.
There is, yeah. And so it's hard, right? It's hard to take that American construct of the American military and the way that we operate, the way that we do things, and then export that onto a whole nother culture or a whole nother whole nother military that has its own set of cultural norms and things like that. You just can't do it one for one. And I think that's really where we failed at all three attempts, is that we tried to replicate them
What
in
we
our
do.
form. Yeah, in a way that we do it. Where we probably should have tried to find a way that worked best for them. So that was the real challenge. And we're giving them our equipment, which is it's high tech, but it requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of maintenance. Yeah, a lot of repair parts and things like that. A lot of knowledge, and a lot of that stuff is very hard to ingrain into that type of army that the Iraqis and the Afghanis were. Not taking anything against them, and then those guys who tried to fight back.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, how do you do that? And I think that's something we always struggle with, and we've struggled with since Vietnam.
I think logistics is really hard to teach.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because the way we do things is, it doesn't take much thought for us. Oh, you need some shit?
Yeah.
We're going to bring you some shit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really take much thought from us because we're so good at it.
Yeah.
And I don't know who down the line in the military said, hey, if we want to be really good at this, we got to figure out logistics.
But it's in our culture too. So the American culture of automobiles and all that type of stuff, that's always evident. We understand logistics and stockpiling, and you can go down to O'Reilly's or whatever. I mean, like, that's there always. We understand that. I mean, one of the biggest strengths we had in World War II is that we were a mechanized army.
Yeah.
But not only were we a mechanized army, but our soldiers understood, like, if the tank broke, they had been working on tractors their whole life. They could jump out and they could fix it, compared to European armies who could not do that. And so it's that same thing. It's that mentality of that logistic mindset that we almost have in the West that's very hard to transport to another country doesn't quite operate like that.
And you've seen that firsthand.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you've seen Iraqi soldiers, you've seen Afghani soldiers,
Yeah.
you've seen European soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
you've seen probably Russian soldiers, I would imagine, right?
I've had some exposure to them, but not a lot. I mean, one or two maybe I've met or throughout
Yeah,
my time. But
yeah,
I would say
think
I would say now Europe's on par with us as
Yeah.
far as logistics and so on.
Really?
I would say so.
I don't think
yeah.
so.
Yeah, I mean, I've trained with the Brits. I've trained with the French and stuff. They're all pretty on point.
It took a really long time to get them Abrams tanks to Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have the scale that we do. So like one, like Great Britain, one of our tank companies is is bigger than all their tanks they have in their whole
Right.
country.
Yeah,
so
that's
they don't have
actually a
that
good point,
scale,
yeah.
but that understanding of maintaining their equipment and things like that. Yeah, they figured that out for
Well,
sure.
and that's speaking of the Ukraine conflict. I've heard a million times, why did we only send 30 tanks? Why did we, these are junk. We don't even use these anymore. And I'm like, okay, you send more than 30. What the fuck are they going to do with them?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, they can't work on them.
Yeah, they got to work on them. They got to repair parts and all that type of stuff.
The
Yeah.
engines for the Abrams are like no other tank.
Yeah, I think we gave them. I don't know if we gave them Abrams. I think we gave them Bradleys.
Yeah, we gave them
not
both.
sure.
We gave
You
them
gave 'em both?
we gave them 30. We gave them 30 Abrams,
Yeah.
and which is I forget how many that is. Like you would know, like the numbers.
Yeah.
It's like a battalion or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
that they
can't
give 'em.
talk to. So I was actually part of some of that, so I can't talk too much towards it.
Right.
Just because of my current position, but
Absolutely.
yeah, we've definitely given them a lot of equipment. That's for sure.
So the for me the Abrams tanks, when you ask, like they go through barrels, they
Yep.
go through motors,
Yeah.
engines,
Yeah.
they go through planetary gears. That's
Yeah.
all stuff that's manufactured only here,
Yep.
and maybe a handful of places in
Yeah.
Europe.
I mean that's one thing that it's taught us is that there's kind of a weakness there.
Yeah.
Because of the rate that they're going through that stuff in that conflict. That conflict is large, but it's not what we would see if we actually to get into like a World War III type
Yeah,
scenario.
if it was something like we would it'd be massive.
Yeah, so
massive.
we've realized that an industrial scale that we have right now is probably not up to par to meet that demand that we would demonstrate in World War III, and so it's kind of a good thing because it's kind of highlighted that a little bit.
Do you think that might be some of the motivation behind bringing manufacturing back to the States?
I think it's a good idea, 100%. Yeah, and that's definitely one of the threats that they've articulated is that too much of that manufacturing is in possible adversaries like China and things like that. So bringing it back to the U.S. is not a bad thing. I mean, it brings more jobs,
Yeah,
more jobs to the U.S.
Hell yeah,
so,
it does.
yeah.
And not only that, but quality control, man.
Yeah,
I am so like this. This is a Chinese table.
Yeah.
It's such a piece of shit. But I paid good money for it,
yeah.
and so I'm not gonna get rid of it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, man, I'm tired of buying junk.
Yeah.
I am so tired of buying junk.
Yeah, if we can control our own industrial might. I mean, the way it used to be back when we were the arsenal of democracy.
Hell
Then
yeah.
for sure, it's definitely not a bad thing.
I buy American whenever I can. It's so funny because
hard to
I've,
do.
I've got my wife looking at, like if it says made in China, like we don't have an adversarial relationship with China yet, but it's heading that direction.
Yeah.
And like finding things that are made in the United States, like I seek it. I'll get on the internet and
Yeah.
I will look for, if I'm looking for something specific,
Yeah.
made in USA, then whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just national pride, the reason why I do that, but it started a few years ago, like buying furniture. You can't buy anything that's quality anymore.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's not. It's. If you send that demand signal too. I mean, if Americans send that demand signal, that's what we want, then that's going to be the answer.
Absolutely.
And so I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's a good thing. Definitely.
I think the jobs,
Yeah.
the jobs is a big thing because like we were talking about Gen Z
Yeah.
and the financial
Yeah.
hardships that it's because our manufacturing base
Yeah.
is gone.
and that's
there's no
and
jobs.
that'll be a cultural shift too. If you bring that manufacturing base back, that's a cultural shift too. Because right now, we teach our young people that you got to go to college.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. So now we have to show them, hey, there's a whole other
I didn't even graduate
avenue
high
that you can
school,
go. Yeah, I barely made it. So there's a whole other. You can go into trades now, manufacturing. If we can bring that back, so that's that's a mindset that we would have to change as well because it's been gone from the homeland for so long.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And I just think back of how proud World War II veterans.
Yeah.
And so Vietnam is always glossed over.
Yeah, it is.
Always.
Yeah.
So thinking of World War II vets and not necessarily Vietnam vets, but Operation Desert Storm vets
Yeah.
in 91, we think about those things and the pride that
Yeah.
it gives us and the pride that those old men have,
Yeah.
you know, when you like some of them are still up kicking, you know, some you get to talk to,
Yeah.
the American pride
Yeah.
that they had
Yeah.
and have is second to none. You don't
Yeah.
find that. And then sometimes you find kids that like hate the United States.
Yeah, that's sad. Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
they
like
get sucked into nonsense that they see online and stuff that were, you know what I mean, like we were talking about earlier. But what's interesting about my generation, the GWAT veterans, is you have the veteran service organizations, the VSOs, American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and so on. The World War II guys are obviously, they're almost dying out. Vietnam veterans are right behind them. Korean veterans too. So you see a lot of those guys joined, First Gulf War, a lot of them joined those VSOs. But my generation is not really flocking to those in great numbers. So they're kind of going away, and it's kind of sad a little bit.
Yeah. That is sad.
Yeah, and I don't know why that's happening. I don't really know. Is it just because we're too busy? Like, I'm just too busy. I don't have time to.
You know, life has gotten really fucking busy, hasn't it? I mean, I'm trying to find time to read your book. It's like murder.
I'm trying to find time to write it. Yeah.
How long did it take you to write?
Like 3.5 years. Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah,
just the research, like a lot of it was research.
Yeah.
And did the writing come naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, I write a lot, so the writing wasn't hard. It was more just finding the time, and thankful to my wife, for making me time, finding me time to do it.
Yeah,
but there was like times that I had to pause and stuff because of, we were moving, we had the baby, things like that. So it's 3.5 years, but there were times where there was like a 2-month break, 4-month break, etc. But yeah.
So where have you spent where have you spent most of your adult life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm from Hawaii, but I left when I was 18. And so at this point, the second most I've spent is Texas. And then I think
What a shit show.
Yeah. And then the third most is probably DC. And then this is probably the fourth most because I've been here twice.
What do you think of the Midwest?
Yeah. No, so the first time we were here in 16, 17, at Fort Leavenworth, we didn't have a kid. We didn't really like it. And then the second time now that we have our son, like we love it now. Like there's it's so family friendly and there's so many things to do with young kids.
It was boring without kids, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was we were at Fort Leavenworth, so it was, Kansas City was kind of not that far, but it was like, oh my
far
God.
enough.
Yeah,
you don't want to
far
go
enough.
there
Yeah.
for,
So, but
like,
now with
lunch.
the kid, it's like, oh my God, we love it here. This is awesome.
So one of the things that we do, we like to go to Worlds of Fun, and that's a great place to hang out with kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got your hooligans with Kansas City. You got your hooligans there, but they're trying to clean that up and stuff. And we love Kansas City for the zoo, Worlds of Fun, and of course, there's Science City. There's all kinds of stuff to do
down there.
with
Yeah,
your
it's
kids.
great. Yeah.
Royals games.
Yeah. He's still young for that, but yeah, we'll eventually get there.
Hell yeah. Are you a sports fan at all?
I'm not huge sports fans, but yeah, I'll watch it if it's on.
Oh man, I'm an NFL nut.
Yeah, see it, yeah.
I love NFL and I love baseball.
Yeah.
Kansas City I've lived here my whole life. I've lived in St. Joe my whole life.
Yeah.
That's what we call St. Joseph for short, St. Joe. I've lived here my whole life, and it always amazes me when I talk to people who aren't from here.
Yeah.
What do you think of this place? And it's funny that you say now that you have a child,
that we
it's
like it.
completely different.
Yeah.
Your attitude towards it is different. And when I travel outside of here, outside of the Midwest, I do notice that how unfamily friendly
Yeah, it
a
can
lot of
be.
places
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
And we don't go anywhere where we can't take our kids because
Yeah.
we don't have a village.
Right, yeah.
So we tend to go places where we can hang out with hang out with our kids in family friendly places. I cuss like a sailor, and so I mean, if you're here long enough, you'll hear my 5-year-old cuss. So I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I hear that a lot. It's very family friendly around here. But a lot of people are friendly as well.
My wife's from Boston, and so, she said like, oh, I thought New England, football fans were diehard, but she's like, they're nothing compared to, Kansas City.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like I think our stadium holds a little bit more than New England. But New England's also inside.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Foxborough's heated.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The last, was it last Christmas? There was a Christmas game. It was either the last Christmas or Christmas before. It was really fucking cold. And I had tickets.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going.
Yeah.
Because it's just too cold. And I'm thinking about, like, while I'm watching it on TV, I'm like, fucking should have went. But, it's very interesting how we are with sports and how everybody overlooks us.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, they call us the flyover states,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, flyover
Nobody ever
states,
pays
yeah.
attention. And like Buffalo fans, when they come here, that's one of the things that Buffalo's known for is their tailgating and their stadium presence. And Buffalo fans come here and they're like, holy shit, these guys
It's crazy,
these guys are fans,
Yeah, you can't. I mean, everywhere you look, people are wearing Kansas City Chiefs gear. I mean,
That's
it's
why I'm
everywhere.
wearing
Yeah,
a
it's
Kansas
crazy.
City
Yeah, I
hat.
see it. Yeah. It's nuts.
And I've actually been like this like most of my whole life. I've been a Chiefs fan.
Yeah.
I wasn't even born yet, man. Been a Royals fan. My mom went to. I was born in 1985, and my mom and dad went to some of the playoff games and they won the World Series in 1985. Nice. So I'm kind of born into Kansas City sports.
But it's weird because Hawaii, we don't have any professional teams, so
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, so it's like we don't, we grew up around sports, but it's not like like being in New England or here, or it's like in your face, and everybody's all about it.
Is soccer a big sport there? Or?
In Hawaii?
Yeah.
I mean, for kids, like just like it is here for
young
kids and stuff, but it's not like an adult type thing.
Yeah, not as popular as it is in like South
America.
America.
Yeah, in Europe and stuff, yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, man, Patrick, I think this would be a good place to wrap up the conversation. We've been going for a little while, and I don't want to keep you away from your wife and kid. Where can people find your book when it comes out?
Sure. So it's it's through Casemate Publishers. They're a big, they're like the biggest name in military history and military type books. But the easiest place to go is just go to my website, and it's patnaughton.com. So P-A-T and then my last name, N as in November, AUGHTON.com. So patnaughton.com. On there I've got links to Casemate Publishers where you can get it. So it's available for pre-order now. And then it's also on Amazon. You can get it through Amazon as well.
Okay.
Both available pre-order. April 15th it'll come out. So pre-order it now. It'll ship right away. And then just before it comes out, that digital version will open up. And that'll be available on the website as well to get it for your Kindle and all that type of stuff.
And ladies and gentlemen, you gotta buy the book because I really want it. If it comes out on audio, you gonna read it?
Yeah, I don't know. They said if it does well, audio, but they didn't say whether I would be reading it or somebody.
I think you should.
Yeah.
If are you a strong good reader?
I don't know. I'd be stuttering all over myself probably trying to read it. I'd probably read it and be like, did I write that?
That would be me because you get into that flow state.
You do. Yeah.
And so like a half hour after we get done here, like I told you, like I'm a stoner. I'm not going to remember half of this conversation.
Right.
To be honest with you, I have to go back and I listen to them over again, and I'm like, oh, that was really witty.
Yeah. Well, like you read it, I write it, and then it goes through a couple rounds of edits, and so then you read it again, and you're like, wait, what? Did I write that?
Right. That's incredible.
But no, I appreciate you having me on. It's definitely been a great conversation.
I'm gonna have to. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when it comes out, I'll
open
get you a signed
invitation,
copy.
and
Awesome.
and we'll do this again anytime that you want to come up here. And man, if you got some flag you want to sell, or come up here, we'll fucking do a show.
Yeah, all right.
And
Sounds
this
good.
has been a great time, man.
No, I appreciate it
Thank you very much.
Yeah, awesome to meet you.
Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Naughton Jr., born of war.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.